What's up, good people? What's up, good people? Welcome aboard. Welcome aboard. We're about to get this thing started here today. You know what time it is. Turning into your the new Sunday service, program that me and Ike put on for you. You know what time it is, so let's get ready to go. Let's get it. I see Ike already down in the back chat. I see people have already made it in the building. So without further ado, let's get this thing started. We're gonna be talking about the black church and all that money y'all be sending to those folks over there. Let's go.
Peace, folks. This is X from TPOT Media. Open your mind and wake your black ass up. You know what time it is. Hit that damn like button as you make your way in the door. Grab a seat, settle in, get ready. It's the Grown Man Hour with your host, my man, Bernard Riley.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Mumia Obsidian Ali. You know who I am. I need no introduction, right? And you're listening to the Grown Man Hour with my man Bernard Riley, heard weekdays right here on YouTube. What do you think about that? How about that? Now let's get back on with the show. Thank you.
What's up, good people? What's up, good people? Welcome to the Sunday service. Welcome to the Sunday service. Let's get ready to go. Let's get ready to get it. Shout out to the early bird squads, those that make it in bright and early before we even get things started here. Who we got in here? Creation Muse in the building says, yes, we need to let go of white Eurocentric Jesus. Jesus did not stand. If he was from the Middle East Africa, blonde hair or blue eyes would have made him stand out. Thank you for your commentary. Creation Muse in the building says, Jesus, Yahshua did not stand out. I know what you meant. Corvus Glaive, I believe that was. He wasn't even white, folks. White Jesus is a concept. That it just represents so many things with black people. There's just the pure concept of it. I don't like the term white Jesus. I don't really care what color he is. My position will get fleshed out as the show goes on. And we're going to get Ike's position fleshed out as well. But he says he wasn't even real, folks. It probably was a dude named Jesus walking around, but whether or not he walked on water and did bar tricks, that's another thing. All right, I'm being disrespectful already. Let me cut it out. Osama Abdul says, help me, Jesus. Shout out to everybody that make it in bright and early. Let me go through this fast. John Dukes in the building says, good morning, Bernard. This should be a good topic. Always. Me and Ike always have great topics. Ricardo Rodney in the building. Appreciate you. He says, they really can't. They need the strength, believes and hopes of the Lord. Yes, absolutely. Ike Ojiaman in the building, about to be coming up pretty soon. Jada LaRue in the building. She says, hey, everyone, happy holiday weekend. Like this video as you enter, share with others. We appreciate your support of the Bernard Riley Show. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. All support is appreciated. Make sure you guys are hitting the like button. I'm going to close it out on this statement right here by Ike that just tickled the hell out of me. He says, I am, with a capital I am, white Jesus. Absolutely. I've always viewed Ike as white Jesus around here. So I'm glad he said it because I didn't have to say it. But so shout out to Ike. Shout out to everybody in here. Make sure you hit the like button. When I do topics like this, I normally get an influx of new people. So make sure that y'all subscribe as well. And that lets y'all know how much of a heathen I am. Today is Easter, right? Is that true? It's Easter? I didn't even know. All right, let you know how much of a heathen I am. But all right, without further ado, we got Ike in the building. What is going on?
Hello, Bernard. I don't know if you noticed in the back chat, but I mentioned that I don't have my Bluetooth. I left the Bluetooth thing in the plane. There might be some echoing, but I will use the mute button, judiciously to sound like old man, the kind of thing old man would say. There'll be judicious use of the... Anyway, so...
Judicious use of the mute button.
So that there's no echo, but my apologies up front. But it's glad to be here. Glad to be back in the States. You might be able to tell I'm back in home base.
Yeah.
Back from Africa, and I'm ready to have this conversation.
Wonderful. Glad you're back. Hope you enjoyed your trip. I mean, what was that, like the longest honeymoon ever? Like you've been down there in Africa for that long?
Yeah, I was gone. It was only about like 5 weeks, a little over a month. But when you got it like that, you can take 5 weeks off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you was down there balling. You wasn't tricking. You was balling. We found out that there's a difference without a distinction without a difference. But that's what you was doing when somebody is having. Well, I mean, when you got married down there, when someone would say that's tricking as well. But that was an interesting distinction that came forth in the discussion about tricking. I loved that when they brought up the rappers or the the guys who just got the player. I get the lady swag, but they getting it because they rich. Oh, he ain't tricking, he balling. But okay. But no, somebody did come up and say it's all the same. They need to quit hating. So there it is. This coffee is actually pretty damn good today. Damn. All right. All right. Make sure y'all hit that like button. Make sure y'all hit the like button on the way in. Make sure you hit the like button on the way in. Where do we start here? Okay, let me just show my cards right out the gate. I do believe people like yourself. I don't even want to say this. I believe people like yourself who are thinkers. And I always say that people like yourself are really just closet atheists, just sprinkling a lot of spiritual dust over things to because it makes it more deep when you just think of the awe and the inspiration and then you start talking about philosophical, metaphysical stuff. And then I'm like, okay, yeah, but the reason Jordan Peterson, I guess we'll start here. When people ask Jordan Peterson, does he believe in God? Is he a Christian? Is he this? Is he that? He always, well, what do you mean? So let's start right there, because that's where our last conversation ended, and that's what made us say we're going to move forward into this conversation. But let's try to get out more or less some ground rules, so to speak. So when we're talking about God, what exactly do you mean? You can reference Jordan Peterson. You can take it wherever you want, but just give the base level ground view of your personal view of God.
So this is something that will require unpacking, and you are right
Yeah.
to reference Jordan Peterson, because yes, I do kind of put myself in that category of people who, mythological, philosophical, psychological, deep, all that kind of stuff going on. But then when you try to pin us down, like, hey, do you believe in Jesus? Well, it depends on what you mean by believe, and what do you mean by Jesus? What do you mean the third day?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So I get it. However, God is a personification of certain principles that we have evolved with, right? It is a personification of existence in itself, right? So not necessarily an anthropomorphication, right? You don't necessarily have to anthropomorphize this personhood, but we tend to put agency behind things, and I believe I mentioned it in the first in the stream prior to this, that people talk about the weather in terms of, well, I wonder what the weather is up to today. I wonder what what Bitcoin is up to today. I wonder what this market is going to do next. In other words, things that we don't have a direct mechanistic understanding of, where it's one billiard ball hits the other billiard ball and we know where it's going to go. We don't have to say, I wonder where the billiard ball is going to go. It's like we have that kind of an understanding. But where there is chaos and misunderstanding, we tend to personify it. Like, I wonder what the future holds. We even personify the future. We personify fate, for example, right? Fate is in mythology, right? Fate is a woman, for example, right? Because, it could flip on you, okay, that kind of thing. So the highest level of what's going on, which is just existence in and of itself, we also personify, and that would be God. And that is how I view God. Does that at least, and I know we have to unpack it, but does that satisfy the question?
No, because we'll circle back to it. But all I heard, right? Well, you explained how we do things or apply intention and agency in things that don't have intention and agency, but when you scratch beneath the surface, we examine things, rather it's a primitive person trying to explain why the wind is blowing and why the leaf is blowing around and swirling in circles when the wind is blowing. Yes, he may very well think that the wind wanted to make the leaves move around like that, but who wanted to make instead of what made the wind blow to begin with, they may go with the who made the wind blow to begin with. And what ultimately ends up happening is that when we research it and scratch beneath the surface, we found out there isn't a who, there's a what. And so the way you just explained God, you basically went a similar route, and you did a similar thing, but on a grander scale. And that's why I say deep down, a lot of you deep philosophical, metaphysical thinkers, really closet atheists, but it's wrapping your mind around I think, as you said in the last show, why does anything exist? It's hard to get past that one, but it's probably impossible to bog down, because I've had to wrestle and struggle with that one myself. I can't call it either when it comes to a lot of this stuff, but we'll dig deep into that before. But I did want you to just lay out your definition of God when you talk about God and what you're talking about. But I do want to talk about Black people, and you got an interesting perspective on this, because I obviously grew up in America watching Black people in the Black church. You spent, I believe, the first 18, 19 years in Africa or Nigeria or something of the sort. Nigeria, that's right. What was the relationship people had with Christianity and, or as we call it, white Jesus over there in Nigeria coming up? What was the general relationship with most people? Christians, like diehard, fundamentalist believers? I know to understand that there's other religions going on, but just what was the overall relationship there with white Jesus?
Africa is way, way more spiritual than the West. And I don't use spiritual in the way in which people in the West use spiritual. I mean, they are more like that person you described that will see agency in the wind, and agency in that little tree over there, and you're gonna hex me or witchcraft or blah blah blah. I think all that is kind of obvious, or shall we say, whatever inkling of that you've seen either in the media or general, um, let's say, knowledge, common knowledge, is true. Africa is very spiritual in that regard. People are very still even educated people, if you will, and I don't fault them for this because I think it's a question of perspective. And I'll have to take a step back because what I'm saying here is that Africa is very spiritual, and I think that's a basic answer to the question before I flesh it out just a little bit more. But in order to flesh it out, I have to take a step back to that whole personification thing. A lot of times we do the what thing in terms of saying, rather than ask whom, why don't we just say what, right? However, the what is useful for a certain kind of communication, for a certain kind of abstraction, and also for a certain kind of engineering. However, you don't know what the hell is going on. Just because you say, okay, well, let me go back to the Big Bang. I don't care whether it's Big Bang or now or tomorrow. I'm asking, what the hell is going, why does this, what is this? And there is no answer for it, okay? And regardless of the kinds of answer you give, whether for the purposes of engineering, for the purposes of communication abstractly, you're still, as a human being, gonna do that personifying thing. And the point is, whether you are the grandma that just believes in it, or you are the person that is able to notice that we as human beings tend to do that personifying thing, it is best to watch it and notice it because it's controlling you. It moves you. And we'll get into it a little bit more. So Africa is very spiritual, right? And so the flavor of Christianity over there tends not to focus so much on, shall we say, the particulars of white Jesus, which, by the way, let's just go ahead and dispel that whole thing. White Jesus is not about white people or black people. Well, let's say it's more about white people. In other words, people tend to look at it as a tool of oppression. That's just people who have white people in the brain. And then they tend to think that white people have them in the brain. Like, nah, white people ain't think about you that much. Okay. All peoples have always, shall we say, recast deities in their own image, right?
Yes.
They recast the deities in their own image. They put, shall we say, the mannerisms, the attributes, the dress even of a particular deity so that it reflects themselves. Simple. It's like everybody does it. Why blame the white man for doing it to Jesus? It's like it wasn't some kind of special conspiracy to let's change this guy into this so that we can. No, everybody does that. People even do it in terms of, forget deities, in terms of the practices and the traditions. We recast the religion in certain traditions and rituals based on what we already also have within our kind of culture, right? The same way Africa takes Jesus and just kind of puts that whole hyper spirituality, better watch out for that person's bad intentions, right? That kind of a thing onto it. And not so much the cultural, in other words, they have their own cultural milieu or topping, icing that they've put on top of this whole Christianity thing, and it's just based on African spirituality, I would say. You can even look at, for example, Santeria, right? Let's say, which is that flavor of the Yoruba religion, with the Ogun and Shango and so on and so forth. Just take that and you put some Mary and Jesus on top of it, and that is more the flavor of how Africans look at things.
Right on. JJ in the building. JJ Dynamite says white Jesus isn't as prominent as we think. It's these fake and non-scriptural pastors who keep the community in disarray and confusion. Yeah. That's a lot to unpack there. We may get into the pastors. We may get into them pastors. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna punt on that one. Thank you for the super chat, but non-scriptural pastors who keep the community in disarray and confusion. I have a personal disdain for the pastors who they will open it up, they will read one passage out of the Bible and just use that passage as just their springboard to just basically give a charismatic theatrical performance. It's like, and what happens when people go their whole
Derrick
life
Jackson.
in church? Right. He's going to be doing that. That's coming to a church near you. He's already doing it technically, but in a different way. But he's going to literally be doing that at a church near you real soon. But yeah, oh my goodness, those people. But so yeah, I do got a problem with that. It's just it's a theatrical feel good performance. But anyway, Snuggles in the building with the super chat. He says the difference between superstition and spiritual. Can anyone tell me? I definitely want Ike to hop on that one. And you're muted. You're muted. Ike, you are muted.
My bad. So,
Yeah.
so far, and we'll get to Snuggles' point. Snuggles' point is really like the whole 2 hours or 2.5, whatever how long we're gonna go on this. It's gonna be addressing and filling in what Snuggles is saying here. In other words, what is the difference between what you would call like this closet atheists, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just the superstitious type? And I think that's a fair question. And the closet atheist, like myself or Jordan Peterson type, okay? Because I'm just gonna, it's best to just kind of let's admit it. Let's put the cards on the table. But even though I'm not really a closet atheist, because I think that those categories of theists, atheists don't really apply to people who go down deep into the rabbit hole, because you're like, there's something else going on in here that those words don't really quite satisfy me. Like, do you believe in God? I'm just like, why? It's like the word, it sounds like blah, 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 blah to me. Like, doesn't make any sense, right? I can't say no, I can't say yes, because it's like, come on, open your eyes. We're doing something else over here deep in this rabbit hole. Now, we will flesh out the difference though. So I said that God is the personification of certain kind of highest mystery, and that there is no way of answering that mystery, right? And that's why God will never leave, okay? Mm-hmm. Because unless you can tell me, let's not even go there, because we're going to get to that point. Now, there is a religious question, okay? What is religion? And I would say that religion is a system of narratives and performed rituals that force us to contend with experience and action, right? And this thing has evolved over time, because people always want to say, oh, well, how about philosophy? Well, before philosophy, there was religion. Even before religion, you had behavior that evolved in mammals, such as, for example, the little rat letting the big rat letting the little rat win, okay, in these play fights that they do. And then later on so in other words, you have these kind of evolved behaviors, which then become ritualized, right? And then you put a story on top of it. And then later on, we can abstract from the story. But before, somebody said, turn the other cheek, big rats and big dogs let little dogs win, right? Sometimes. In other words, they understand that the ones that don't do that, they cannot be continuity of your worthwhile life and the society. You keep on beating, not letting the little rat win, over a long haul, the little rats are going to gang up against you, or the little chimps, and they're going to take you out. That's how it tends to be. We have these kinds of strictures, if you will, written doctrines that are many, many layers or many steps after that. But you have these performative rituals and then narratives, and we're not going to get into the philosophical part yet, but these things force us, okay, to contend with experience and action. And that's what religion really is. A set of rituals and narratives that force us to contend with experience and action in this world, because it is worthwhile, or it is necessary to contend with experience and action. Now, and as we kind of go down with this here, because I see here, it says, I think more black people spend money, okay, at the club, tricking Jordan and so on and so forth, than church. Okay, in my opinion. Okay, keep up the okay. What do you think about that, Bernard? I mean,
Well, it depends on a number of things. I went to a church back many moons ago when I used to go to church that they made a really strong push for tithes and offerings. And the only way that you could be blessed, you got to be blessed by paying your tithes up. They repeated that sermon to the point to where it's one of the sermons I have committed to memory. Will a man rob God? Yet he robbed me in tithes and offering, and blah 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 blah, and some other stuff. I guess I don't remember it as well no more. It's been a while, but I had that one committed to memory. Like I could keep going on and on and on and on with that one for a while. And they talk about the God pouring out a blessing so big you won't be able to receive it. Open up the floodgates of heaven and pouring out a blessing so big you won't be able to receive it. And you're restricting all of that by not giving your tithes and offerings. So they line people up, they come, they pay the tithes as 10% of your weekly income, net or gross, depending on whether or not you want a net blessing or a gross blessing. Exact quote that was said every Sunday. And then after you've paid your tithes, then they remind you, wait, stop. There's more. You really haven't done nothing yet. And the reason you haven't done nothing yet, because the tithes, well, that was owed to God. That was his. That you didn't do nothing. You just gave him what was owed to him. Never mind, it's scriptures, plenty of scriptures that suggest that you really shouldn't be paying tithes, or they wasn't even referring to your weekly income. They had a such thing as money, a form of currency back then. The tithe was whatever you grew, but that's a whole nother debate. I'm not getting into that. But you didn't do nothing by giving him 10% of your weekly net or bi-weekly net or gross. No. You did nothing there because that was already his. So it's only when you go beyond the tithe. That's the real deal on how you open up the floodgates of heaven to get a blessing so big that you don't got room enough to receive it. Is when you go beyond the tithe to give the go beyond the tithe and give the offering. The offering is what opens all of that up. It's the offering. And so people get back in line then for the offering. That's so I saw a church do that every Sunday, and it was multiple churches that did that. And not to mention, like once a month they would bring in some traveling evangelist who would preach one of the most dynamic sermons ever. Like, I'm just ready to go run through a brick wall for Jesus. And but the sermon would wrap up and close out with, in order to seal the deal on this blessing, I need 100 people to get in line to give $100 for the 100 years of iniquity. I mean, so
look, this is something that it's prevalent overall. Okay, you're talking about people doing and saying silly stuff because you're trying to catch or find out what the hell is going on with us who say, we're over here on this side, but we never quite say whether or not we believe or not. And what the hell are we up to, right? And to us, it's like, okay, I don't listen to people on just about anything. Why am I going to listen to this idiot on the pulpit, right? So that has nothing to do with the fact that existence exists. That fact is so far away from idiots on the pulpit that it's like, I don't even know why. And I kind of know why. Well, but in other words, I'm separating myself from that whole thing in general, while also I can point to the reasons why it is that way. Now, I made a video called Generosity.
Real quick. I do want to make this very clear, because when I talk about my lack of faith or lack of belief, and a lot of people like to try to say that it was that experience in the church that led to that. Trust me, it wasn't. It was just deeper thinking about the big questions that made me skeptical of our modern understanding of Christianity. That is so I just want to dispel that myth out the gate. The ridiculous stuff that people did in the church, like that would be pretty weak of me to say the ridiculous stuff that people did in the church caused me to lose faith in a higher power, in a being, in a God. Like, no, that's small. Like sort of like what Ike said prompted me to say this. The question of why does existence exist, whether or not it has a creator or not, completely separate from some guy in a shiny suit hustling money. Those are two separate things. So I'm glad you said that, because that prompted me to make it very clear, because I was going to have to deal with this in the comment section about somebody saying don't let crooked pastors stray you away from strong faith in Christianity or this or that. I'm like, no, it has nothing to do with that. But I did want to answer that question where he said he think people spend more time spending money in the club, tricking, buying Jordans or this or that or blah blah blah. I'm like, no, Jordans don't have a 10% of 10% of your weekly income monopoly on on that. It's like they don't. I mean, I've seen it. I remember when a doctor and a lawyer joined the same church. They were a doctor. They were a married couple. They were the Huxtables. They joined the church together. The husband's a doctor. The wife is a lawyer. Oh my goodness, the red carpet that got rolled out for them. They were sitting right up front, because there's a man coming in making what, $450,000 a year. She making like $200,000 a year. Do the math on how much the church is about to get off 10% of that. Then the offerings on top of it. Do the math. So yeah, so that's a separate issue. When you're talking about the amount of money that's spent in the church. No, I don't think all those other things can mess with it. That's why I put it in the thumbnail, jokingly but serious. The black church is the only thriving black-owned business in the black community. It is there's details in nit and gritty and all kind of stuff in that I'm not going to get into, but I take it with a grain of salt. It was a joke, but at the same time, it is truly a thriving business in the black community. Shout out to Melody real quick. She said Jesus had brown skin and wool hair. That's what the Bible says. Shout out to Melody. Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate that. And so that scripture right there confirms that Ike is indeed not Jesus. So, all right. So go ahead. Go ahead, Ike.
Yeah. So one of the things that I always kind of, to someone of my personality, is like, okay, if he was black, if he was white, if it was this, if it was that, it's the same question I still have, which is, what does that have to do with the fact that you open your eyes in the morning and existence exists? In other words, if you're not, again, religion is a set of narratives, and that's stories, okay, and rituals performed that force us to contend with existence and action, right? And we are religious creatures by that definition, not by the I go to church definition, not by the particular denomination definition, not by all that kind of stuff. It just kind of falls out of that, and it's way downstream of all that. So you mentioned the whole tithing thing, and I made a video a while ago called Generosity is a Superpower. And it is something that I think is kind of well understood. Well, why do you give? Well, you give in order to demonstrate mastery. You give so that you can be in that position where in sales, you don't have commission breath. You are not desperate, because the world does not give to people whom are desperate. If you're desperate, you don't get a number. If you're desperate, you don't get a loan. You need to demonstrate mastery in order to get. And when you give freely, you are literally saying, money, I am the master of you, because you remove a psychological tick. And this is something that I kind of say over and over again. So the principles there, when you go down, from the level of behavior, and then also there's a level of just ritualistic acting out, and then there's a level of a story, this kind man, the good Samaritan, that kind of thing. And then there's a level of kind of abstract philosophical dissecting of an idea, which will say, okay, when you give, you're removing a psychological tick from yourself, which says that you are a slave to this thing that you're giving. Once you break that, once you become more of a master of that thing, you almost like remove your handbrakes, and you take more risks. You're able to think that you deserve more of that particular thing, just like either it's her number or whatever it is. But in this case, you're using money, right? But it applies all through. But if we wanted to put it within the religious context, I was talking earlier that in this particular regard, for example, okay, let's talk about existence, okay? We are here. we are conscious of the fact that we experience here, and it is one of the greatest mysteries. It is almost like an insoluble mystery, the fact that anything exists, because there's no logical proposition that you could tell me why anything exists, including telling me that God made it. That's not satisfactory either. That's just, it's like pushing it's just pushing the ball down the road. It's so obviously inadequate, right? Okay, well, you could say anything, like, oh, it was blah blah, it was gooba. Like, what is gooba? Like, whatever, bro. Like, I open my eyes and things exist, and there's nothing that can ever explain it. However, we have evolved a set of truths, okay, about the ways of being. In other words, things that are aligned with survival and worthwhile experience, not just for the individual, but for the group, and not just for now, but through time, right? In other words, it's not a simple thing to just say, well, how do we, what is in other words, there are questions such as, is existence worthwhile? Is it fundamentally good? What should be our attitude, our disposition towards existence? Should we be Cain, resentful, or should we be Abel? Abel, the story of Cain and Abel type stuff. In other words, but we have evolved over time a set of actions, principles, which start basically just as kind of actions, just as dumb actions as mammals, that are best for our survival of the individual and the worthwhile experience of the individual through time. One of these is sacrifice. And as I'm circling back to the sacrifice thing, because we're talking about this giving, first of all, I give some kind of philosophical dissertation about, okay, well, of course you want to give because you want to master something. And we get that, right? If you're holding on to your money, my precious, then you don't understand. You don't understand the secret of giving. You need to be like, hey, no, I don't need money. Money needs me. That kind of a thing, right? That's what you're doing. You're trying to alpha your way into more money by saying it literally is what it is, right? But before we even got there was this notion of sacrifice. In other words, we knew that, and this is seen in mammals. In other words, delayed gratification, right? And then we personified it. We said, there's something about existence that you can bargain with. Mm-hmm. That's that whole personification of existence again, which is God. It's like, I'm evolving out there in whatever, hunter-gatherer, whatever it is. And there's just something, even before I was a human being, that we just kind of know in there that there's something about this existence whereby I can almost bargain with it. Not just even in terms of giving it tangible things, but I can bargain with it psychologically. I can say, hey, I'm going to fast, right? I'm going to restrict myself in this particular way. And somehow I get power in another way. We can get into the psychological, philosophical reasons why that is. But intuitively, we know these things to be true. Okay. Now, the bastardization of it is when that guy in a shiny suit comes out and tells people, in other words, if the guy came out and said this that I'm telling you now, I'll be down with that. I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. Sacrifice. It evolved over time. We see it in certain animals. We then start ritualizing it. We ritualize it we actually literally take a sheep and we burn it to the existence, right? And we start acting out this kind of thing, which we have noticed because it's good for survival and the perpetuation of the group and so on and so forth. But then people take it down to like, oh, well, you need to give 10% because it's without any kind of explanation of where it's from. I'm distinguishing the difference between, myself, the quote unquote, as you would say, closet atheist, and the other kind. And so far, I would not say, oh, I don't believe in God, because it's like, what is it to believe in this personification or not believe in the personification, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you're talking about things like, for example, you mentioned, let's just say fasting, refraining from eating or pulling back, giving up certain things, and okay. Well, let me make sure I ask this question very clear, because you talk about principles of giving, mastering money. You're talking about practical reasons why, for example, not having what did you call it, commission breath? Is that the right term? Not having commission breath. But do you believe? And I get the feeling you don't, but I do want to make sure we get a clear understanding on this one. Do you believe that giving something is going to, in some transcendental kind of way, make something come back to you? Or is it just for, or are you saying it's just more of example, more of a situation where yes, you're kind of going to get what you kind of going to get what you give in terms of the universe, but not in some mystical way. The mere fact that I do tend to treat people nice, I do tend to treat people with respect, it reduces the probability that I'm going to be disrespected. If I ever get disrespected, it's normally by a complete stranger who does not know me. People who know me tend not to disrespect me because I'm very so in that sense, I do get back what I give in that sense. If you understand what I'm saying, it's almost like if you eat healthy, you'll be healthier. It's almost like it's a direct cause and effect. Now, I think where some people go to the moon with it is that no, they look at it as you're doing this, you're giving this, you did this good deed, and almost in a butterfly, not even a butterfly effect kind of way, but in some completely out of nowhere, the universe is going to go and make something come to you that had no causal effect in the real world with this deed that you did. Like you helped an old lady cross the street over here in Missouri. Then sometime 3 weeks later, when you're in California, when you get lost or something, somebody is going to come out and help you and get you completely squared away, give you a room and board and get you on your way. But it's because you helped that lady cross the street. I just want to make it clear. That's not what you, or are you saying that? Is that what you're saying? That's what you're arguing for?
No. Or let me put it this way. The difference between these two types, or this particular person you described and myself, I understand the principles by which sacrifice leads to delayed gratification. In other words, helps in the future. I also understand what you talk about giving, and these two things are kind of like related. And I understand that there's an external aspect in the sense that you literally, you're putting stuff out there and somebody may hear about it and throw it back. But there's also an internal aspect in terms of you don't have commission breath anymore. You have a certain peace in yourself when you believe you're a good person, okay? In other words, there's a vibes aspect of it, right? Which I can unpack the word vibes because, you know, but let's just use that word, right? When you do these good things, you're going to have good vibes about yourself. It's not nothing mysterious, okay? Mm-hmm. And people detect good vibes in you. Yep. Now, every now and then, there is almost like this 5% of it, which is you can't explain yet. You're like, that's kind of interesting. That person you described likes to hold on to that 5% and be like, yeah, miracle, you know? For me, it's just like, okay, well, I don't know, but the principle still works anyways. It's practical, it's pragmatic. I'm very pragmatic. In other words, it's working, I'm going to do it. I'll try to explain it. If I can get up to 90% explanation, fine. The other 10%, I'm not going to woo-woo-rise it and then hang my hat on that aspect. I'll just be like, okay, well, I don't need to explain. The fundamental difference is this, though. Those people tend to look for miracles in the ultimate miracle. The ultimate, it's like you open your eyes, Bernard, and there's this thing called existence, whereby there's this human beings and air, space, time, causality, atoms, this, that, the other, and you're still looking for a miracle. You're insane, in other words. I think these people are crazy. This is the ultimate miracle. Creation, existence, call it whatever you want to call it, is the ultimate miracle. So to then say, oh, as long as I see some kind of causal link between the giving here and the whatever here, then it's not fun anymore. I want some woo-woo. I want some grand universal computer, AI, computing my thing and then giving me that. Oh, that's more fun. In other words, it is kind of insane because even that is still, anyway, I don't want to get too, I want to leave it at that level of I want to leave it at the intuitive level because trying to explain this kind of insanity is a little too much. Now, granted, a lot of people are that way. A lot of people are that kind of insane where they're like, oh, you know, if I see any kind of causal link, then it completely diminishes for me. It's the kind of people who say things such as, "Oh well, you're just a bag of chemicals." What the hell are chemicals? Well, what would you rather? Oh, would you rather be a bag of goopla? Like, call it whatever you want to call it. It's like people always trying to be like, if I can put a word on it, then it loses all its mystery. And I think that is why religion is important, because religion, again, is that set of narratives, and when practiced right, okay, and it would be practiced right by the people like me, but when practiced right, it's that thing that forces you to look at experience and action. So far, we've been talking about experience and some action stuff, right? But I would say, look, people need to just focus on the fact that existence exists more, rather than trying to talk about these, fantasy out there. But this person, did he live? But here's the thing, right? We've evolved certain truths, as I mentioned. We talked about the truth of giving, for example. And shout out to, is that Travis Wiley for the $20 super chat?
That's Travaris. Yeah, that's you got to be born and raised in Black America to understand to know that name. That's Travaris. Yeah, Travaris Wiley for the building fund. Shout out to you. Appreciate you, Travaris. Let me go ahead and read these super chats before we get going. Sincere. Okay, now I don't know this one. Uneno. He says, "Thank Lord for another day waking up. Question, does make you a bad person since rather read word at home than going church?" I think I understand what you were saying there. Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate that. What's going on in the icon picture? Look like somebody is laying down with somebody standing over them doing. I don't know. That don't look
a tattoo, or I don't know.
He's being sacrificed. I don't know what's happening there. Let's look a little coachish in that picture. Let me read the rest of these super chats. I know SKC may come up and talk some junk. The only time SKC really stopped trolling is when we start talking religion, because he Supreme King Coon, he loved his white Jesus. He loved his white Jesus. He really do. So he gonna come up here and defend white Jesus when I drop the link. But SKC in the building, he said, "Salute, Ike. Funny that some won't use the same energy to question this." Here we go. The scientific nature of Darwinic macro evolution, natural selection is God to some. They'll never question it scientifically, even though to even talk about it they'll never question it scientifically. The whole pursuit of that idea is a scientific pursuit. What are you talking about? Okay. All right. I'm not gonna go there with SKC, but I'm sure he's gonna come up defending white Jesus. Zaki to Dunya. I think I said your name correctly. Thank you very much for the super chat. Appreciate that. There were some, I think it was some others. Hold on. Almost missed them. There we go. Sick Sounds. I like the name, kind of. Excuse me. He says, "You can take certain principles in the Bible and apply it to your life, even if you're not religious. I also can take certain principles in Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and all kind of stuff and apply it to my life." I mean,
but the thing is, those things are primarily, in other words, you have to create an order and hierarchy of first, which came first, and all that other stuff is just taken from the primary impetus, the source. They're all religiously based. In other words, I'm not saying that they're coming from the same impetus for religion. Whether it's Star Wars, whether you're asking what would Jesus do, or you're asking what would Han Solo do, or what would Luke Skywalker do, you're doing the same thing.
Shout out to Melody again. And yes, like the stream. I haven't been reminding you good folks to like the stream. We got 225 people in here, 98 on the likes. Whenever I have these subjects, I normally get new people coming in. So the new people come on in, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I do this typically Monday through Friday at 9 a.m., even though the Sunday service has become a regular thing here. So I think we can pencil it in. I do Sunday at 9 too. I guess we're going to say Sunday through Friday. I don't know. Just look for me during the week at 9 a.m. Look for me during the week at 9 a.m. and on Sunday. But yes, definitely like the stream. Good people like the stream. Thank you, Melody, for the super chat. And also, no, I think that's it. I think that's it on the super chat. Shout out to Spiritual Logic, aka Hawk. He always be in these conversations. That's when we start talking about the Bible and the Lord. People like SKC, Spiritual Logic, Hawk come out the woodwork. He says, I say for those who don't believe the Bible, don't do you, LOL. But if the alternate doesn't satisfy your existence, don't hate on those who I think he means those who do believe the Bible. LOL. Thank you for coming on through. Where was we at? Because you kind of got cut off with the super chat. So you had
So
you had mentioned something.
I
Go
think
ahead.
that this topic of religion is like a circle, right? So it's not really hard to stray away from where we're at. But it's like this spiral that keeps on going deeper and deeper and deeper, that rabbit hole that I talk about, such that if you're someone that kind of corkscrews deeper and deeper and deeper in, even though people are saying the same things, using the same words, but some of us become very reluctant. Bernard loved White Darwin. Some of us become very reluctant to use the same kind of language. Now, I think that if I were to just restate what I said about religion, not necessarily what I said about God, which is like the personification of existence writ large, and that I have no issue with that in the sense that it's almost like arguing against the fact that you have a hand. Like, why do I have 5 fingers? Why did it evolve this way? And this is just, you did not create existence, okay? Not that I'm saying I know who created it, but when you are what you are, and part of what you do, part of how you be in this world is that personification and finding of agency thing. And whether you think you're doing it consciously or not, you're doing it. So let's get into dig into that. I think it's in the action part of my definition, which says that religion is that set of narratives and performed rituals that force us to contend with action and experience. We talk about the experience part. We're here, okay? But is experience good? Is it fundamentally worthwhile? What should be our attitude towards it? What are certain attitudes that are more beneficial towards existence than not? And that I say that it comes even before we were human beings or whatever, that we see these kinds of right attitude, wrong attitude, what works, what doesn't work, and not just for the individual, but for the group, and not just for now, but through time. So you have to what is good for you, and what is good not just right now, but in the future, what is good for your family and everything, and the whole of species through time. So that's where you can't just say, oh, well, in other words, the general has to say, you know what, some soldiers have to die in order for the war to be won. It's a grand vision, in other words, of what is good. And the narrative aspect of things, because I said there's narrative, there's action, and then there's experience in that sentence that I gave. And these are 3 important aspects. The narrative aspect goes into what someone was saying earlier, which is you can take principles from the Bible, and you said, well, you can take principles from Harry Potter. And I said, well, you guys are pointing out to something that's key. Here's the thing. We have to act, right? It is important, right? We have to contend and think about, and introspect about, in the broadest sense, like, is there a good way of acting? Is there a bad way of acting? And then we've evolved certain truths, like we talked about the little rat versus big rat, whereby the big rat knows that if I continue to what happens is if the big rat doesn't let the little rat win, the little rat's not going to want to play anymore. It's going to get resentful, and there's going to be an imbalance in the force, if you will, right? So even the rat and the dog, they know, okay, you got to turn the other cheek, right? Way before anybody wrote any book and said turn the other cheek. And way before people from that book then go and say, well, what does that mean? In other words, I'm saying that this is the religious story. Just like your hand evolved, these things have evolved right here in this existence. To be arguing with it is kind of silly. Now, we need models. It's another thing that we've evolved in. In other words, we need models in order for action. Like, what would Jesus do? What would Han Solo do? What would Harry Potter do? What would Luke Skywalker do? Is the only way in which you can, because somebody may say, well, why can't you just write the principles, right? The principles don't move you. And I would ask for some pushback, Bernard, on this. Like, If I were to tell you, just write the principles down, or if I told you the story of a hero's journey, pick your favorite hero, right? Who went and slayed the dragon and suffered. Maybe it's Abraham, left his father's house, suffered through all these things, and then made it at the end. Or it's a Jesus story, or it's the Han Solo story. In other words, what actually has a power to move you versus just an abstraction from the story. In other words, you have these behaviors that evolved, and then you ritualize them, you kind of act them out, and then these are all the pre-linguistic aspects, preconceptual aspects, and then you start having stories, narratives, and then in that narrative packs a huge punch. I cannot tell you what to do, but I can ask you, what would Jesus do? And it actually has, number one, you can interpret it, and also it actually move you more than if I just had some lines of code that says you should do this and do this and do this and the principle blah, 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 and refer back to chapter C16 of it doesn't work that way. But when you have a story, a narrative of a hero, a mythological story, even in science, for example, we say something like narcissism, right? And there are many isms that are like this, especially within the realm of action. Well, what's narcissism? Narcissism is the story of Narcissus, right? It's like, oh, Narcissus, he fell in love with his reflection, blah, 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 those kinds of things which move us. Narcissism is an abstraction of it. And as I said, these philosophical abstractions are good for communication, for generalization, but they will not move you. I don't care who you are. You are moved by narrative. You are moved by watching a model, whether the model is General Patton or Jesus or whomever. And religion is just saying, hey, one thing that religion says is, hey, mimic, because that's what you do. We mimic. That's another kind of evolved thing with us. Like, we cannot help but mimic. We mimic desires, right? The kid does not want the pink ball until the other kid starts playing with the pink ball. And up to we are adults, the same thing. That's why we want the Jordan. So come on, it's so obvious. We're constantly looking at each other. What should I want? What should I want? What should I want? One of the things religion says is, hey, mimic something transcendent. And it gives you a transcendent model, whether it be Harry Potter or Luke Skywalker, blah, 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 or the ancestors, which, kind of the way of certain religions, say, mimic this, because this will lead to less violence rather than me wanting what you want. Because that's what, because everybody's going to start wanting what everybody else wants. And that's why we need economic growth, by the way, because, hey, you want pink balls, I want pink balls. We better start making more pink balls. Otherwise, we're going to kill each other. So one of the things that religion does is, number one, and I'm talking about this whole narrative thing. You need a story, and you need models in that story to emulate. And religion generally gives you a transcendent model to emulate, so you're not just keeping up with the Joneses, if you will.
You do realize, well, I'm sure you do realize it, but when we were talking about how to fix the problems between men and women in a modern westernized context on a macro scale, not the individual guy just doing what he got to do to make sure that he's having a happy, flourishing life. No, how to fix these problems on a macro scale. The solution was kind of the same when you're talking about the story aspect of it, following these principles and this belief. It's almost like you were saying that, yes, it would take some grandiose figure with a huge vision and a plan to put it out there, almost like something to strive for, to follow. It's funny how you circle it back to even when you're talking about solving practical problems and things with practical application, some spirituality and mysticism can come in it. Whether we talking about something from a story from the Bible or just a principle in a hero's journey. I do like how you put those together. O'Shea Duke Jackson in the building says the Lord is good. Hallelujah. There I said it in the building. Says very bold topic. Blacks do well to forget white Jesus and know the universal spirit exist within them. Ike's thoughts on spirit. Hey, we're gonna dig into that, even though you've already given some of your thoughts on that. But he says, Wealthy Firefighter says, everybody worships. Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate that. A lot of people came through with the super chats. I do appreciate it. Excuse me. Who else we got in here? Give me a second. We got that is Dallas Cowboys in the building with the super chat. Appreciate you. Also got Sincere Uneno. I think I said that right. Hopefully I said that right. We got E Capone. Religion keeps us in order. Very true. I do believe it was certainly necessary at one point. Really, what Ike was just more or less breaking down is why it was necessary. Those principles always exist. I remember somebody said that if it wasn't for the Bible, we wouldn't know that "Thou shalt not kill" was a good idea. But I'm saying we would have never made it there to the point where he actually wrote down on. We would have never they would have never made it to Mount Sinai with a fully intact group of people if they didn't understand the principle of why they shouldn't kill each other long before it was ever written.
That's a brilliant thing, Bernard, and that's why I like to put it through time. I go back to even other mammals, right? And then I say, okay, these things, but for human beings, we need a story or narrative because we're not just instinctual beings. We're not trees that just put our root on the ground and through osmosis and other chemical processes is going to get what we want and do photosynthesis with the sun. We actually have to act, meaning we have to make decisions. We have to kind of create some kind of scheme. What is to do? What is the attitude to have, right? So even though we've evolved, right, to kind of know, okay, well, best not to kill everybody, best not to let to just oppress the little rat, blah, blah, blah. But when you get into now human land, you eat the fruit of good and knowledge of good and evil. Your eyes are not open, right? You're going to need now to write some stuff down or to say some stuff, right?
Yeah.
You're going to need to now put it in a narrative form and have a model to follow because you can't just do the instinctive thing anymore. So again, I'm fleshing out what these, as you would call it, closet atheists, which I don't think I am, right? What I am is what I'm describing right now. And if you can't put a box around it, then it's fine because why are people always trying to force these boxes around people, right? So, but that's the difference. That is how I would look at it. It's like there was a narrative that is needed, and then philosophical kind of abstractions come from these narratives where we try to code it. But the thing is, those philosophical abstractions don't move us. We still need narratives and models to move us.
Sincere Uneno says, you can read word, but do you live by word? Question. That's more of a question for the audience. I mean, neither me or Ike is a Bible thumper to say, are you living by the word of God? Like, so that's not a that's a question for members of the audience who subscribe strongly to the Bible. Weird question to throw out to you. I'll read these super chats and I'll throw out this question to you. Omega Dreads Gaming Channel. Jesus forgave. This may be goofy. I don't know. Let me just, okay. Jesus forgave, but he didn't say anything about his father vowing revenge for humans that sided with Satan as God of this planet with definable features. Montero enrolled on. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you, Omega Dreads. Thank you. All right. Spiritual Logic, aka Hawk in the building. He says, salute Bernard and Ike. Great discussion, brothers. Right on. SKC, why are you still talking about Darwin? We moved on from that. He says Darwin jumped back in time when he ate a magic scientific finch who showed him the original prebiotic soup. Yeah. We gonna let SKC live. We gonna let him live. Zaki 2 Dunya in the building. Shout out to you. Ozzy O in the building. He says today's churches are introduction camps versus spiritual growth centers. The religious patriarchs worshipped, studied, prayed, and meditated on God. What do you think about that statement right there? The religious patriarchs worshipped, studied, prayed, and meditated on God.
This is one aspect of since we're talking Christianity in general, that I think is less emphasized in especially Protestant secularity. Okay, is almost, you can say, late stage Protestantism. In other words, Bernard, you're just being a good Protestant, okay, when you decided to leave the church. Because it's almost like this downward slope that was almost inevitable when basically, and not to get too technical with it, okay, but the point I'm trying to make is if you go inward or backward, you need to emphasize the importance of consciousness, which is another word for spirit, which people tend to forget, and they think that spirit means the ghost, right? But it does mean the ghost. The ghost is a consciousness, a disembodied consciousness, right? So remember your consciousness, and therefore remember what that there is something, just like we talked about practices of giving, practices of turning the other cheek, and so on and so forth, that you see both in animals, and delayed gratification, the sacrifice, blah, blah, blah. There are also things that apply to spirit, consciousness, right? One of which is meditation. And this was key, the contemplative life. And I find that if there was more emphasis on these kinds of things, in other words, taking, and this also goes into why there's not so many men in the church these days, because the church has become a social club, and the more social of the species is going to like that, right? Which is women, right? Which is fine, right? But the church is not supposed to be a social club, okay? It's a place where you're forced to contend with existence and action. Religion writ large it is, right? And you're supposed to be told, hey, you're inadequate. You're full of shit. You're not good enough. You need to pick up your cross and climb up that hill. Same thing Jordan Peterson was saying, and men in droves paid money to go listen to him say that stuff, right? The men who were supposed to say, oh, no men in church. And this guy goes spewing out religious stuff. Same thing, basically. And even did the whole religious series, like the Bible series was reading, going through Genesis. And people pay money to go sit there, men that is, because the words are taken seriously, number one. And people are told that they're inadequate, that they need to do more. They need to take bigger responsibilities, not all this kumbaya nonsense. And it's not some kind of social club about, oh, the oxtail and the rice and and also emotional outbursts and kumbaya singing and crying and speaking in tongues. It's like all that stuff is what drove men away from the church. So revert back when some of this person said the church father, meditated upon, the word, and then also bring back that focus on order and on consciousness. How does one order one's consciousness? Not how does one go and be part of some silly social club with regular riffraff.
That's interesting. I had the thought in my head, how would the church go about bringing men back into the church? And Jordan Peterson was really the answer. I mean, he started his own, that was man church, what he was doing right there. But Carl Robertson in the building. Oh, and by the way, Utopia, thank you for that Cash App. Appreciate that. Shout out to Ace in Spades, atheist, agnostic, skeptic, free thinker, gang, no shame. But which one are you? See, you a closet atheist. See, you're an atheist, but you put all that other stuff on there, the agnostic, skeptic, free thinker stuff, to muddy the waters, so you don't gotta so you don't gotta put your fist in the air and claim atheism. Just a closet atheist. I see the game. I see the game. TBH. What is TBH? I don't know what that is. TBH church seem like one big business nowadays. Oh, the black. I know I don't know what TBH church, but yeah, the church is a business. The church that I went to, he said he literally said, this is a business and I'm the CEO. The bishop at the church. He literally said that, and he ran it like a business, and he was about his paper. He all the way up until he died, he was about that paper, and passed it down to his son. And his son is running the church now, and his son has sons who are being groomed to run the church when their dad died. It's a business. It's a family business. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. Clue in the building says, salute B. Riley and Ike. Why are you streaming on this sacred day to remember the resurrection of the Easter Bunny? I actually... I honestly woke up today forgetting that it's Easter. But hey, if I could do a Sunday stream and it could pull in church views, and a more intelligent conversation could be had about religion and spirituality, I'm all for it. I'm with it. I'm down with it. And so there's that. So there's that.
Someone, okay. You know, did you have a question or something? Because many things were said, and I was like, I was just going to randomly react to things, but I think maybe you should.
See, this is where it gets okay. When you say the consciousness is spirit, and I feel like okay, it's potentially going into woo territory, and it's not even that much of a bad thing, but I hear it all the time, and a lot of people when they're talking about religion and spirituality, and they try to connect it with things in science we may understand or may not understand. For example, when they say energy, you know, the universe made up of matter and energy, but energy is really the spiritual. They say energy and spirit are the same thing. You know, so you talk about pre-Big Bang, there was energy, the energy that sparked the Big Bang, but energy is the same as spirit, which means the spiritual has always been eternal, and that spiritual is like it turns into something when you start saying things that I think we understand energy, but it's taking something that already exists that we got a general understanding for and calling it something else. We don't fully understand consciousness, but it's the danger of taking consciousness and calling it something else that it may not be. Go ahead.
I'm going to try to hold these in my head. Well, first of all, let's just dispel that whole kind of, now I'm going to take God word and turn it into something else. Or I'm going to talk about time before time. I'm going to talk about the Big Bang as though it explained anything other than just, so you look back, you look at the expansion of the universe, you write the equations backward, you look through your micro. You're just doing observation, empirical science and stuff, right? This is not an excuse. People always want to interchange metaphysics for science, right? Metaphysics has its limits, and then they start interjecting scientific stuff in there, right? And intuitively, we know all that is BS. When someone starts talking about the energy of okay, whatever, I'm not interested in even refuting your arguments. I could, but it's a waste of time and energy.
But why? But you do the same thing when you say consciousness is spirit.
It's a word. I'm trying to dispel the woo by saying when people come in and we did spirit, it's like you're just talking about the aspects of being that have to do with consciousness, right? And spirituality are the rituals, right, that one does in consciousness space. In other words, we always have this kind of duality problem where there's this body thing and then there's this consciousness thing. And it's kind of strange that, okay, if somebody believes in something and I show them a picture, if they believe they're Catholic and I show them a picture of Mary, for example, it literally causes them to their heartbeat or something. They have physiological reactions. Someone else does not. And this thing just happened in their consciousness. And it's a question of the stories that are in their consciousness, in other words, right? And you can't call it an apple or a spleen or something. So we call it consciousness, right? That kind of a thing. And it has its own kind of separate area, and we kind of deal with it. In other words, we think we're conscious, right? Even if we don't really know what we kind of think we're conscious, right? And I'm just saying that the word conscious and the word consciousness and the word spirit are the same thing I think spirit is of the Germanic root, consciousness, spirit, or mind, that kind of a thing. And that I'm sucking the woo out of it rather than putting woo into it. I'm saying, okay, you're talking spirit, let's talk consciousness.
Okay, I know you said you had some questions or some thoughts that you gotta hold in your head. I want to throw this one. I want to run this one by you, and this could take us in a different direction. But maybe you got a short answer to it. But this is the best explanation when talking about the universe. Okay, there was a book called Atheist Universe. It was written by some guy. He wasn't that big of a deal, but before Dawkins, Hitchens, Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett wrote their books, this was the little known guy who made them say, there's a market for this. And then they sort of came out the closet and went full gangster with their atheism and wrote some hardcore atheistic books or whatever, because this guy, he sold like I don't know if he said he sold 100,000 copies. I remember he was on a podcast. He was talking, and I bought his book, and he was really just for. I don't think he was some PhD. I don't know if he was super credentialed. He just was a dude. I think he may have taught high school science. He just wrote a book. He just was a dude that wrote a book, and it did well and made him a little money. What he laid out in the book, and it made sense. I just want to get your thoughts on this. Is when talking about the universe and going back, because I know you scoff at the idea of the Big Bang of this, and yeah, it is just doing the equation backwards, going back to a point. That's really what it is in many ways. There's more to it, but that's what it is in many ways. But here's the point that was made, and I've said this point on the show, and I do want to get your thoughts on it. Is that we understand that matter, here's the word energy again, and energy is spirit, but no, we're not going there. But okay, matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed. Okay, matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed. It only can change its form. If something can't be created yet it exists, we can assume that it has had to have always existed. If something cannot be destroyed and it exists, we can assume that it will always exist. So this thing that we've established that has always existed and will always exist, but has the ability to change its form, from there we can look at the simple fact that matter and energy, exists, always exists, has ability to change its form. The universe is essentially made up of matter and energy. So we can conclude from there that the universe in one way, shape, form, or another has always existed, will always exist, and just changes its form. So even if we're circling back to the Big Bang, all we're talking about is the universe going from one form to another. And whatever happened with the Big Bang, we don't know what was going on before the Big Bang. It's maybe impossible for us to know, but it was a different form of something going on. And through some quantum fluctuations in a vacuum, blah, 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 a bunch of weird Einsteinian words, and poof, the Big Bang happened. And what we're watching is just seeing is just a form of the universe. So basically, like for me, that's the satisfying argument that you don't need a purposeful, intentional creator that created something with a purpose. It's just existence exists. And I know that's a hard one to wrap your mind around, because you open your eyes and you see it, and why is it here? But if we have a general understanding that existence is simply matter and energy, and matter and energy can't be created or destroyed, only changes form, then existence has always existed, and in one way, shape, form, or another, it will always exist. This is the current form that has been going, but it's been some type of existence for eons. So that's pretty much the way I can explain the universe existing without getting too supernatural, magical, woo Deepak Chopra isms in it.
You there's something you add to my formulation. I say I open my eyes and existence exists, and I say it's a trip. You then add the well, why does it exist? I don't go there. I think that's the first mistake. That's the first mistake that people make. And that is why I don't find the Big Bang explanation satisfactory. I don't find the God explanation satisfactory. All I know, and I can agree with you that it is plausible, matter not created nor destroyed. You can talk about this kind of, Big Bang and also Big Crunch kind of cyclical universe thing happening. Maybe the Big Bang was kind of the other side of a black hole, of the many, many, many ways, multiverse type theory, so on and so forth. None of that really has anything to do with, because I don't ask the question of why. And this thing of looking at time, like, let's look at time and go back and try to see as though you were going to find something, is pointless. The whole point for me, and I think the whole point for any kind of way of orienting oneself towards the good of the universe, because what we tend to do with religion is we always orienting ourselves towards that awe and mystery. Like, oh my God, this exists, right? Either through psychedelic stuff, which by now we know scientifically, right, to interject some scientific stuff in there, that the quote unquote religious experience that people have from psychedelics cures their soul or their mind, right? Or, you know, we know that. And even before we were scientifically studied, we kind of suspected that, yeah, you know, get a nice trip and you see the oneness of everything and you're like in awe that anything exists at all and blah, blah, blah. People tend to come out of the other side a little more chill, unless their brain fries and then, you know, end up like, you know. But you get my point. And I'm just trying to emphasize the thing that it's not about trying to find a beginning for me. It doesn't matter. It's more existence exists. What should be my attitude towards it? And it is an attitude of pure mystery and awe. And then there's gratitude that follows from that. But to ask, well, why? Or God, I think you already started making a mistake. This is my personal metaphysics, as I announced last time. Like, the minute you start asking why, you've already made a mistake. Go read Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, and he'll explain why this is a mistake. You're taking things from inside a bubble, and you're trying to go outside the bubble. It's like you're trying to go outside time and ask when did time start. You're trying to go outside this universe of space, time, and causality and say, what caused space, time, and causality? Causing implies that space, time, and causality already exists. You can't be like, well, caused, cause. It's like, people do this all the time, right? What caused cause? What's the time before time? What's the this and that? And there are two things wrong with it. Number one, it's a logical fallacy. Number two, it's not going to answer any questions, really. It's not really, oh, now I know where it started. So what? It's still here, and it's still trippy. In other words, it's more of a certain kind of alignment with it. And I think that religion, again, this particular set of narratives and ritualistic practices that focus us on experience and action. On the experience side, we're always trying to move towards the reverence and the awe of it. That's what it's trying to focus us on, because that gives us more of a right attitude that helps us propagate. Because there is a danger if you becoming annoyed with existence. You could become Cain. You could become, this is not worthwhile. If you lose, in my opinion, if you lose that essential mystery and awe of it. And it's not a question of why or whom. That's a very silly mistake that people make.
All right. Kevon Slims says this idea of Jesus is what's keeping black people back. It's not real. Let's move on. He will not make a way. You have to make your own way. Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate that. And there's a lot of super chats on the table. And I know you had a lot of things that you wanted to respond to that we went all over the place. Hopefully you can gather it after I read these super chats, and hopefully nobody else throws another big question on the table. But salute. Men can come back to the church when it's a spiritual growth and accountability place, not a social club. The salt has lost its flavor. Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate that. Mike Israel says, new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and hit that like button. New to the channel, what's your opinion on the Hebrew Israelites? Excuse me. They all right, but no, no. I got no strong opinion for or against their I have questions. I actually had one on the show, and we kind of talked about it, and I still got more questions, and I'll just leave it there. I got more questions. I'll just leave that there. I'll keep it mild. I got more and more questions. It's a lot of things that they say that I don't know. I'll leave it there. Zaki to Dunya. Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate that. SKC in the building. So then explain organization with entropy, Bernard. I gotta re-Google entropy again, because a young Earth creationist have not asked me about the entropy question again, but it's been answered. Just like you can Google the question, you can Google the answer. You do know that, SKC. So you could go answer it yourself, really. So you just pop quizzing me to see if I got it off the top of my head. That's all that's happening here.
Yeah, I would assume he's talking about, well, there is entropy, which is a kind of general move towards disorder of the universe. One other particular kind of way of saying it is just more
Gravity.
expansion of the universe. But then life tends to be an organization principle. However, we outsource our entropy. In other words, in order for life to create this order, there's a lot of disorder and heat that it produces. A lot of you got to chop up the environment and do all that kind of stuff. You got to keep on bringing in order and creating disorder outwards. It's almost like, well, you got to vacuum up your room to create order, but you're burning a lot of coal to create the electricity to do that, right? So we outsource our entropy, and I think that more importantly is if I can interpret SKC's Gripes. I think that, at least for me, he has a gripe with something I'm not saying at all. Like, I'm not into the whole, well.
No, me and him got history on this.
Okay, good. So it's between you guys then, because I'm not into the whole creation or who didn't make it or who didn't make it. It's like, I'm in there, like I actually exist. And I'm like, there is existence, there is action, there is consciousness. And these are big things to tackle. And the question of all these other things are just kind of mistakes, in my opinion. They're just mistakes, missteps. Who, why, when? It's
Jockey's Retro in the building says it's all about the here and now, or the hereafter. It's all about the hereafter, not the here now. But no, I'm with you. I'm with you on the here and now. Live now, live for today. I think life has more value and meaning. Let's hypothetically speaking, if it is the case that when we die, we just die, it's almost like a light was on and click, the light is off. You're done. You don't exist. You go back into the state you were in before you were born, and you lived there. I don't know who I'm quoting here, but you were dead for a billion years before you were born, and you didn't even notice. You weren't inconvenienced at all. You just go back into that state, and you just don't exist. The light is off. Yeah, that's sad, and that is disheartening. It is. However, that does make life more meaningful right here and right now today, versus if you do believe that life goes on forever and ever, amen, that this life becomes less important, less significant, less meaningful.
It doesn't change my stance either way. It doesn't change my stance on the focus on consciousness, spirituality, the focus on action, for example. None of that matters. This is just, I'm saying again the same thing I've been saying, which is all that beginning, end, after, before, blah, blah, blah. It's so irrelevant to the question of the real religious pursuit, because you've noticed I haven't said anything about, now, why does that kind of thing exist? I kind of get it. You want to keep the wolves in the society at bay, okay? Because there's generally, the wolves can't just run rampant. So even if the wolves want to act, they still got to kind of convince people that they're acting in some kind of a good way. In other words, it actually, in terms of, let's say, punishment, crime and punishment, law punishment, and so on and so forth, is just another way of saying the same thing. In other words, like that heaven and hell thing, it's just another way of saying, well, why do we have the police, right? Because it's more of a practical thing, right? Now, it's a practical thing within a particular domain, and it has to work in that domain, and it's more of a group thing than an individual thing. In other words, it's more of a group check, group kind of narrative, and arguing about whether it's real or not, it's okay, whatever. Like, that part doesn't really move me personally anyways.
RT the Brand says, ask Ike about the concept of dragon energy and how it ties into spirituality. I don't know what dragon energy is. It's like a kung fu movie.
RT Brand. Okay, so there is, when I say dragon energy, because I think he probably caught me saying it somewhere. And he's
I don't know what it is.
Well, it's just a phrase to explain a particular kind of disposition towards action. Okay, so Kanye West uses it. He talks about dragon energy, and he says Trump has dragon energy, right? Big Money Bernard, old man voice. Now, dragon energy is a focus on will, if you will. It is like, I'm going to will certain things into existence. I'm going to focus primarily from the inside. I'm going to go inside and I'm going to find a core, some immovable spot, right? It's a very individualistic kind of thing. It's a very kind of like, I'm a leader, I'm a dragon, I'm going to make things happen kind of a disposition. It tends to be one of open and creative people who are not into following crowds, people who are into kind of marking their own way. And the way to do that is you need to go in deep there, either find a void or the nothingness or whatever, but find some core in yourself, and then you will certain things into being. You're like, because. Why did I do it? Just because. I'm going to stand by it. I'm going to create. I'm going to enact. I'm going to be the Ubermensch. It's very Nietzschean in that way. Not Machiavellian, because that's kind of more scheming and political, whatever, but it's more of a, I am going to will a certain kind of existence for myself, and also I'm going to act on it externally as well. And that is dragon energy. Why is it spiritual? It has to do with consciousness, because you gotta, in other words, people, and my whole thing about mastery of subjective consciousness comes into play here, which is, in order to find that immovable mover in you, you actually have to go in there and practice spiritual practices. Spiritual meaning, rituals of the consciousness, rituals of the spirit, spiritual, right? Which means, if you look at my channel, go check out my channel, and you guys should be spamming it on the chat, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, yes. My bad. I forgot about that. Drop Ike's channel in there. Drop it. Come on, y'all. You're slipping
What's
on
up,
your
Silent
pivot.
Lamont and all the other moderators with the wrenches out there? You guys are having such a good time in our Sunday sermon that you forgot to spam Omega Dreads. Come on now. So the point is, my preaching about mastering yourself, mastering feeling, image, and talk, which is the way in which your subjective consciousness manifests itself, right? And that without this kind of mastery, you cannot do certain kinds of things, such as this dragon energy that I just kind of described. You cannot will certain things powerfully without you being settled. And in real time, you need concentration and relaxation and sensory clarity. And these things are actual exercises that you need to, or you have to exercise this thing. In other words, use formal use of them, just the way you exercise, like the way you exercise your biceps. Contemplative and meditative practices are formal use of concentration, equanimity, okay, and sensory clarity within the space of your subjective consciousness to develop these capacities. And it's no woo-woo there, because you can go to my channel, which is being spammed right now, go to the meditation aspect, and I have a series on why you should meditate and how you should meditate. And nowhere in there you're going to find any woo. It's literally what I told you, which is there are capacities within consciousness. Everybody's heard of concentration. Everyone knows about being in the zone, right? You can practice being in the zone. And when you can practice being in the zone, you can move things in the world, right? In a way that if you did not practice being in the zone, you cannot do. It's not external. It's not that kind of physical thing. It has to do with you working on your consciousness. So that's how I would say dragon energy and spirituality kind of come together.
Good stuff. Pressure Buzz Pipes and Makes Diamonds says, I believe in a unseen power source for whatever reason, but they could miss me with the Jesus guy. Evidence of his non-existence trumps everything else. Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate that. Also, Native of Rain, thank you for that super chat. Before you dropped, I didn't read it. Ike read it. But thank you, Native of Rain, for that super chat. Shout out to Melody. Says, since energy doesn't die, do you think it goes into a new body and is reborn? No. That's my short answer to that one. No, doesn't. That's she's looking at energy in the form of like the energy is spirit, you see, and the person die, that energy / spirit is floating around and it needs a host. Now it doesn't exactly work like that. I'll say there's zero evidence that it works like that.
Yeah, we're so self-centered in a certain way, and that's the way we are. That's kind of how we are. We kind of live from the inside out. That we always got to think that, oh, there's something in there in me that's kind of particular, special. The energy part is going to go into something else. But you could just look at it like a tree that creates apples. They come down, they fall off. Next season, more apples come out. And you're not going to ask, well, did the energy of that apple that dropped last fall, is it in this new apple now? It's like, well, the tree just apples, right? The universe or the planet just peoples, right? And that need for my persona, my identity to be part of something, right? That then is part of the thing. It's like, no, well, at least, right? I don't know. Okay, I don't know. Okay, because it might be the case that, oh crap, me and Bernard are, we're the pearly gates, and like, oh shit, who knew Bernard?
Right.
But really, though, the more kind of practical, empirical sense of it is the tree creates apples, they fall off, creates more apples, they fall off. It's all one process. But to go asking about the spirit of that one apple and is it in the new apple, I think is just another kind of self-centered question that we tend to ask.
Yeah. I agree. A lot of religiosity is centered. It is self-centered. A lot of it, even by people who profess and claim to be very humble. To believe that the entire universe itself was created, all that's going on in the universe, of billions, hundreds of billions of galaxies and hundreds of billions, if not trillions of stars and possibly zillions of planets. Yes, look it up. Most stars are suns that are really far away, and our sun is just a star that's up real close. Most of them have planets orbiting around them. It's a big ass universe with a lot going on. But you think the events written down in a book in a language that you understand is the events that ultimately carry the weight of the entire universe. It's all heaven, earth, everything is going to is weighing in the balance of the particular religion that you happen to be geographically born into on the body of land on the planet that you live on that promotes that religion, and the whole damn universe weighs in the balance of the events that was written down in the book that was fed to you when you were 5. Like, that's some self-centered stuff. No, like, the universe is too damn big for it to be all about this little speck of dust that we're floating on here. And what I was about to say Jewish carpenter, a dark-skinned, woolly-haired carpenter did on. So I'm going to be respectful. But the universe is too big for us to for an individual to think it's all about them and their religion. I hope I explained that right.
Here is where the closet people, like you could call me, and we're gonna, oh, Ike said closet. What closet is he talking about? Whatever. Here is where we tend to then, here's how we do that woo-woo dance that you just described. In other words, I look at a hand that evolved, I look at a body that evolved. And when I say evolved, you can take it however you want to take it. You can take it at, oh, it's there and it's shared. In other words, it's a mechanism that works. It kind of is a body plan, if you will, that is shared with other mammals and so on and so forth. It kind of works. The same thing also with a psyche or a consciousness and the things that it produces, right? And I gave a kind of a linear, a genealogy, if you will, talking about there are these particular behaviors that we see in animals, right? Whether it be delayed gratification or, letting the little rat win sometimes. And then when you get to the human level, we then have to conceptualize it by acting it out in ritual. We literally go and burn this thing. We personify the existence by saying, oh, you can bargain with existence. The rat is not thinking, or these animals that do delayed gratification are not thinking that they're bargaining with the existence. But we as human beings, kind of that's how we operate. In other words, we come out of the universe and we kind of are operating this way. So it is significant in the sense that we're coming out of the universe. What I'm doing is I'm doing like a bottom-up grandiosity. While some people, what you're describing is, how can you do this top-down thing that you think, oh, the whole universe is about you? But I'm saying, okay, well, not really. But the universe created you, and you have this kind of set of systems with which you operate, just like your hand, the same thing with your psyche, and the same thing with your need to conceptualize and to have narrative and models. So pay attention to that. Don't just say it's just something. But yes, it is a mistake. I would agree with you to then take that something and be like extrapolate it out into the whole universe again.
Well, see, I'm but I say this affectionately and jokingly, but kind of serious. I'm of the church of Carl Sagan in the sense that he would take all the woo spiritual religious language out of it and just speak about it purely from a scientific perspective. And he said he would have what amounts to a religious experience based off his scientific understanding of the universe with nothing, no modern day spirituality needed. It need not apply. And I do understand that when somebody was arguing with him saying that if all that you're saying, somebody said Carl Pagan. That's funny. He said someone was basically explaining to him. I'm going to open it up. I'm going to open it up for people to come up with questions, comments, and concerns and whatnot. But somebody was ultimately saying to him that, you know, if the scientific view of the universe is correct, if you strip everything away, with human beings, you break us down completely to, you know, into the, you know, we made up of a certain elements on the periodic chart. So if that's all we are, if we're just matter and that's it, we're just matter. And the person was arguing that makes us somehow less, but he said, if all we are is
that's stupid.
Yeah, if all we are is just matter, does that make us less, or that make matter more? Like that, it makes you look at matter in a completely different way. And it's like, so I can get my mind blown religious experience off of something like that, and then extrapolate that to the scale of the universe, and the whole universe is made.
You're over here with me on this side then, because we're like, hey, existence exists. You just calling it, oh, you could call it matter, you could call it pixie dust, you could call it fairy dust, you could call it whatever. As long as you can put a name on it, then you can say it's just that. What was it supposed to be? You know what? Like, you get what I'm saying? It's almost like they have some kind of alternative. Like, oh, but we can't be just these chemicals. It's like, you are the one that gave it the name chemicals, right? Yeah. What is it supposed to be? What arrangement is it supposed to take? What would satisfy you? Like, it's so silly to me. That whole kind of thing about like, oh, it's just, it can't be just this. It's like, that thing that you're calling just is magnificent. Carbon is magnificent. Yes. It is crazy. It exists. It takes all these crazy forms and does all these kinds of things. Who are you to call it a just? What will satisfy you if there was some kind of, spiritual computer back there that was kind of type? Like, I don't know what they're after. I really don't know.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. The links in the chat. Anybody want to come on up? Open the doors of the church are open. The doors of the church.
While they come up, there are a couple of things that someone asked about Hebrew Israelites. Okay, and it dovetails with something that you mentioned, or that you pointed out to, that we discussed when we were talking about how to bring back order. And I said that there has to be a narrative dimension, right? Because as an individual or as a group, we need that story, right, to bring us together. Because we do not move based on logical propositions. In this particular regard, with regards to existence and also with regards to action, we need a model, okay? And we copy each other, and that's true. Religion gives us some other model and by religion, I mean Star Wars or Zeus or whomever, whatever, all that stuff is all religious, in my opinion, right? Because it serves that same purpose, and nothing else can move us like that. There is no way to break down into code the line, what would Jesus do, or what would Skywalker do? You need the story actually to be, all right, and then you would it'll have to happen that way. So the Hebrew Israelite thing is, what I think about it, because you answered like so. They tend to be more about the conquest of the external world. I did a stream called, for example, I forgot the name of the stream, but it's more about master morality versus slave morality. That's the name of the stream. Okay, master morality is the morality of King David. Okay, so you have this person, he's the paragon of morality, right? He is King David, a man of action, a man of conquest, a man of concubines, right? He's out there doing stuff. In other words, he's satisfying the lower ends of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the mastery of the external world, right? And then what is called slave morality, and this is Nietzsche's term, is all that, turn the other cheek, be meek, sheathe the sword, all that kind of stuff, okay? Now, both of those can just be reinterpreted as one is about the external world, one is about the internal world, okay? Especially after you've mastered the external world, you then need to sheathe your sword from a position of strength. In other words, someone can slap you in the face and you're like, not a big deal, right? I'm not going to I'll get all belligerent about this right now because I'm trying to master myself. In other words, I'm not going to be controlled, okay? Now, the Hebrew Israelite aspect of things, which I tend to be very partial to, in other words, I'm very partial to the Old Testament, is about that mastery of the external world, the King David. It's therefore more masculine, okay? And there is more of a focus on the practical and the pragmatic. So those are kind of my thoughts on it. It's practical, it's pragmatic. They tend to like the rationality. They're not very spiritual. In other words, they don't focus on this consciousness thing, because that slave morality thing, the Jesus thing, the New Testament thing, tends to be looking inwards, right? And it tells you right there in the book, like, it's not about the law. It's not about the external world. Look inwards. It's about God in your heart and the Holy Spirit, right? It's all about that consciousness thing, the thing that moves you from within, right? While the Old Testament or Hebrew Israelite type stuff tends to be about go over there to that land, kill all the women, the children, the goats, and everything, and take it over.
Hold up, we lost you for a second. At least I think I did. Hold on.
Yeah, he blacked out for a second.
Oh, you went mute for a second. Are you back?
I'm back. So I don't even know when you lost me. Sorry.
It was just a second, brother.
Oh no, it was just a second. You can carry right on.
No, I just concluded by basically saying that there is the mastery of the external world, right? Go out there, the land of milk and honey, reward right here on earth, right? Not a lot of spiritualization, not a lot of internalization, not a lot of consciousness talk in terms of the Old Testament, in terms of Hebrew Israelite type stuff. Therefore, it's more masculine because that's what men tend to do, lower end of hierarchy of needs. And then you have all that self-actualization stuff, which is more New Testament type stuff, right? So I'm partial to the.
Oh wait, really quick. SKC just came up in the back chat. He said he got 3 minutes to try to sell us Jesus. So he only got 3 minutes. So we're gonna let him bastardize science and try to sell us Jesus. Go ahead, SKC. You got it.
Hey, what's going on, though, Bernard? Hey, man, you be tripping me out with all these. You throwing these things at me, talking about young Earth and selling Jesus out. I don't believe in any of that stuff, by the way. But anyway,
sure.
The whole idea of when people say science, they really haven't looked into the differences between macro and micro evolution. To give you a point in case, there's a huge scientist right now. His name is James Tour. Right, he met before Congress. I think it was last week, showing them the ideals of graphene. I don't know if you've been covering it, but it's going to change the way that we build, how energy is produced, and so forth. Ike knows that knows what I'm talking about. They have already produced graphene and have various companies that are producing it right now. Now, he's a synthetic chemist. And when he breaks down the ideas about macroevolution, it doesn't make sense from a synthetic chemistry point of view, not of any type of I'm trying to come at anybody for some thought of, a God or anything. No, just from science, it doesn't make any sense. And he and a bunch of other scientists have lots of writings about it, and they have proven it without any other scientist coming to them and saying, oh, no, here's an explanation. So when stuff like this is presented to people that say, oh, I believe in the science and the macroevolution. Okay, well, let's just debate it from that sense. And when we go and talk to other scientists that actually are working in the field, not individuals that are going around and writing books, no, working scientists who have companies and patents, and we are living off of many of their much of their work. When we talk to those individuals, they laugh at it. Now, I just don't understand when these things are put before people, why they have the look that you have right now, Bernard, of, oh, here we go. And we talk about working scientists that are putting stuff in the field right now.
There are more working scientists that don't take the position of the cherry-picked working scientists that you found. So you finding some that don't believe it or don't accept it it just doesn't mean anything. It doesn't carry nearly the weight that you think it carries. And the last time you did this to me, where you came up with links and articles in hand, and you dropped the links, and when I find it is the link of that said Darwin was wrong, something his tree of life disproven.
It is disproven.
I predicted that article was just being clickbaity with the title, but when you break it down and read it, they acknowledge in there that they didn't disprove it. They just found out something new about it that they didn't know, that kind of just tweaks the understanding of it.
So if that's the case, then why did these scientists that you're revering right now, why did they meet in 2016 and at Oxford University to discuss that they need to revamp the entire thing?
The only thing that they needed to revamp is down at the microbial level. They found out that instead of it being more of a, I think they said more of a ladder, it's just more of a web, but it's still doing the same thing. It's just doing it differently at the cellular level. That's all they were talking about.
Okay, now, just how you say, just as a simple change like that, as it was just went from a ladder to a web or whatnot. They're using language in order for the layman in order to understand. But what the scientists are stating is that the chemistry doesn't make sense.
This is the
do you know how difficult even the concept of a simple cell doesn't make any sense. The cell is not simple at all. And the further that we go from the Miller-Urey experiment, the further away they go from the concept of saying that the cell is simple.
Nobody said it was simple.
Okay, what does it say in textbooks?
Do y'all hear that? Do y'all hear this?
Yeah, do you hear this? What is written down in the textbook? Is it not described as simple?
Awesome.
It does. A single cell is not simple.
Correct. It is not. And
now,
one single cell together right now.
One single cell in a petri dish compared to a big ass grizzly bear, in the collection of cells that make up a grizzly bear, compared to that single cell is simple. But when you break down that cell at under a microscope, it's extremely complex. And of course it is. I mean, cells has been around for billions of years, evolving and doing all kind of shit. So of course,
correct.
They're complex.
And the formation of one does not make sense from a chemistry point of view, because in order for chemicals to come together and to create life, they have to have enough energy and organization to work against entropy, which is a law.
This is okay. This is classic.
No, that's not a God of a gaps. That's a law of the universe.
Okay. The process of how chemistry turned into biology, there's a lot that's still unknown there. They've done a lot of good science on it. They can mix
there's not together. A whole thing that's not just a huge gap. Hold on. That's a gulf. It's a universal gulf.
No, okay. There's always going to be things that they don't know in science. Even if they answer that question, is going to raise 1,000 more questions that they're not going to have answers to. So you'll still be able to do this, but they can't explain this type of dance. We're going to be doing this forever. Humans going to never have everything figured out. So just trying to
it doesn't change the fact that the chemistry doesn't work.
Trying to plug Jesus into things that
I'm not trying to plug any of that. I'm just saying that the science doesn't work. The chemistry doesn't work.
To plug. What do you mean the chemistry? You're just saying
the chemistry does not work.
What do you mean the chemistry does not work?
When you go from what they state is a cosmic soup,
okay,
and go from pre-biology to biology, the chemistry that we have today cannot explain it. It doesn't work.
Exactly. Okay, so good. You just basically, I'm going to pass it to Ike, but you basically just said God of the gaps. All you just said is they don't know how chemistry turned to biology. They don't know how to link the chemistry and the biology together. Now, amino acids are the building blocks of life, and those can be produced in a lab. It's things that they can do, things that they have found out, but the full blown grand slam home run, all you're basically saying is they don't know yet. And of course they don't. I mean, of course there's going to be things that human beings don't know and don't understand. That does not mean we get to just sell some stuff that was said by goat herders thousands of, okay, I'm not gonna be disrespectful. I'm past the Ike. I'm past the Ike. Go ahead.
So there is a
thank you, SKC.
Certain distinction that needs to be clear here with regards to evolution versus origin, right?
Thank you.
And it's the same thing with the whole Big Bang thing too. That tends to happen where people are like, "Oh well, the universe expands or it evolved this way. We can move backwards, and then they were going to try to find the origin." And it's like, well, I think that evolution, which has to do with mutation through time, you can observe it in a petri dish, in cells, because they tend to evolve faster and so on and so forth, right? Mm-hmm. Adaptation to the climate, sexual selection, those kinds of things. Even though in populations and ecosystems of larger animals, you can see that, these people adapted this way because of this kind of. That thing is different from, well, how did life start? And
thank you.
Darwin was never into the business of the whole pre-primordial soup thing, to the best of my knowledge. He was more like the evolution of species. And he was trying to do some kind of a backwards thing by saying, we observe this kind of variation, and he was making an argument. I left a link in the chat there that has to do with mathematical challenges to Darwin. And this was in Stanford University, not kind of woo-woo nonsense, right? So for me, all these kinds of scientific quibbles are 100% legitimate. I am a man of science. I'm a man of science. That's funny. But, and being so, I understand completely that there's always revision, gaps, so on and so forth. And I think it's absolutely necessary to note that there is a difference between origin and what we call evolution, which is just adaptation and change or genetic mutation in time, which you can literally look at in a petri dish as these little cells go from one generation to the next and the next. And that's all I was talking about, or I was referring to when I say, okay, well, or you could talk about cultural evolution, right? We could say, well, everywhere we have had these stories, they have kind of come this way. We look at our little partners over here in the animal kingdom. They do certain kinds of things. We take it to the next level by conceptualizing it, right? They're over there letting the little rat win. They're over there delaying gratification. We conceptualize it. We put stories around it. We have all these things and so on and so forth. That's one level of it. And that's the thing that tends to move us. And then afterwards, we have a scientific, or shall we say philosophical abstraction of the ideas that are contained in these stories. And that's what I mean with my whole evolution talk. And whether you say life, you can show me when life began or not, to me, it's still the whole, because I awake right now today. I observe the world existing and I am in awe. You don't need to convince me of anything. In other words, that's why I don't say I don't believe in God, in the sense that you're not gonna, I feel that to be arrogant, I feel that I'm in more a place of spiritual awe, mystery, and alignment with, with the God, if you will, than the people who are trying to take me in through all these other places. To me, all I got to do is open my eyes And that's it. Any other questions you start asking, I'm like, you missed it. You missed the point. You missed the point. You missed the point. Once you start asking any questions, you already missed the point because I'm already there.
All right. Really quick. Native Arraign says SKC is on to something, Brother Bernard. All he said is the chemistry don't work. The chemistry don't work. La, can't hear you. The chemistry don't work. That's all he really said. I mean, it goes, Ike summed it up better than I did, that evolution deals with what happens after life is here. That's what evolution deals with. How did it get here? How did it go from chemistry to biology? That is a mystery. And all he's saying, it can't be done. Most scientists, the vast majority of scientists, are not saying it can't be done because they understand that there's a lot of things that they just don't know. They're at the drawing board. They live at the drawing board. And in the event that they ever solve that problem, they will be still at the drawing board trying to solve other problems. And when they solve those problems, there will be a team of scientists out to refute what they just figured out. And if those scientists refute what they figured out, they'll win a Nobel Prize. And guess what? Another team of scientists will get hard at work and make it their life's work to disprove what those group of scientists did. So when we're talking about science, we're talking about a system where it's self-correcting mechanisms built in, where they're always fighting tooth and nail to get as close to the truth as possible, to get the right answer as much as they possibly can. So that's why when I look at religious texts, I'm looking at something that was written and can't be changed and really can't be negotiated with. You can't learn new information and say this old information is wrong because that old information came from on high. So therefore, you're putting yourself in a state where you can no longer learn. You can no longer grow. You're basically on a hamster wheel, a 3,000-year-old hamster wheel. So that's why I'm all for new knowledge. Ace in Spades, shout out to you, says, "Goddamn, Bernard, pass that knowledge on these fools. This one goes to the show. Debunk the woo and nonsense. My last super chat. I'm all of them, by the way. Shout out to you. Appreciate you. All right. Make sure y'all subscribe to Ike's channel. The brother drops a wealth of knowledge on a regular basis, so make sure you're getting over there, subscribing to his channel. But without further ado, we got to go to Jay Ibrahim. Welcome to the show. You have the floor.
Hello, can you hear me well?
Yes, very well.
Now, this topic is interesting because a lot of people do not even understand that even if they follow the Bible, it is saying the same story as science. Let me give it simple. In the beginning, there was light. Big Bang. And then there was the plants, and then the animals, and then the people. There is no contradiction with science and evolution when you look through this prism. So a lot of people simply do not understand even their own texts that they seem to prescribe to. Now, in relation to SKD, it's like this. SKD is conflating.
SKC, by the way, SKC. Oh, but carry on. You got it.
SKC is conflating origin with, as Ike said, the evolution mechanism behind it. Because he's saying the chemistry does not make sense. No, the chemistry makes sense. We know what is inside a man: carbon, sulfur, nitrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen. We know the chemical composition, the magnesium and the calcium. We know what makes up man. What we do not know is the composition that is missing, the link between creating chemicals to life. Now, does it mean we will never find it? We don't know. And if we do, does it disprove God? Of course not. As Ike said, the mystery behind the existence of even the chemicals means that there is still something. Having a higher understanding of knowledge does not dispel the predecessing understanding of the mysteries of life. These people conflate knowledge with mystery. Knowing something does not remove the mystery. It simply enhances you to seek a deeper mystery behind that mechanism.
Amen, brother. It's like, yeah, you could call it this, call it that. You could find out, oh, I found out the mechanism. Does that mean that therefore there is no God, right? Or because you don't know the mechanism, that means there was a God? It's like existence exists. That is the beginning and the end. Now, it is difficult, I understand, and that's why some people need to be religious in a particular sense, right? And that's why you were drawing the distinction between someone like myself and then the others. For me, for someone like myself, and for the Jordan Petersons of this world, that's all we need is existence exists. Everything else is superfluous. Everything else is like, but the chemicals is like, do you know what the chemicals are? Do you know where the chemicals came from? But it's like you're just putting names, processes, so on and so forth. As J. Ibrahim said, you're confusing knowledge with fundamental mystery.
Wait,
the
hold on,
fundamental predecessing
real
mystery
quick.
that is always there, never goes away.
I'm stepping away for a quick second, Ike. I'm sure you and Jay Ibrahim can bounce ideas off each other. I got to step away for a couple minutes.
No problem, no problem. Shout out to Snuggles in the house with the $5 super chat. And it says, too much people trying to out $5 me. I can't have it. I want to keep this on the screen so that they can. Okay, good, Snuggles. Now, so I have a question for you, J. Ibrahim, and it is this particular formulation by Carl Jung. He says that in the West, we tend to prefer, because we're materialists, we tend to prefer, as it has to do with the question of material versus consciousness, a starting point that favors material. We say, oh, we can explain consciousness through material. It is particular arrangement of material, therefore there will be consciousness, okay? I don't know the arrangement yet, but once I figure it out, I'll be able to explain consciousness. He says that it is equally valid to say that since we have these two things that we cannot resolve, someone can equally say, I'm going to start with consciousness and then try to explain material that way. And with the ultimate consciousness, the ultimate spirit being God. Okay, now he's not necessarily making that argument. He's saying, though, that both arguments are equal. And it does spark some thought, right, as to the mystery of these of this duality, to the extent to which there's duality. So there's the duality, which may or may not exist. Your thoughts on that. And then there is the preference as to some people want to start with material. Will explain everything. Material, the atoms, the everything, there's particular arrangement, and then it'll be consciousness. That's the starting point. Some people say no. Well, how about I start with consciousness? And what are your thoughts regarding this particular seeming duality?
Well, if you look at it that way, first we have to decide, is consciousness material? Because matter, if we accept that matter exists, and if consciousness is in the world of matter, then consciousness itself will be material. So in fact, there is no contradiction there. They're exactly the same thing. They might be expressions of different types of matter, but they are both also matter. Now, if we take your question and we turn it the way you have presented it, is consciousness an exotic type of matter? Is it different from the normal matter that we experience? Then I think here what we can do is we can see that the consciousness might exist in an eternal realm. And by eternal, what I mean is consciousness could be that which is eternal even before the matter, the thing that connects itself to the oneness of everything, which is God. If God represents himself or herself through the medium and the channels of matter, and then limits himself to one individual body, then that could be consciousness, because it seems that we're connected somehow, despite differences, to something beyond.
Connected somehow to something beyond, God being the ultimate consciousness, one particular kind of interpretation that you're giving, okay? Ultimate consciousness there, expressing itself through matter. But do you think that it is equally valid, or did you dispel that in the beginning and perhaps repeat yourself here? Is it equally valid? Is there a duality? And I know you say, repeat again as to why there is no duality between this. or I'll start with matter and I'll try to explain consciousness, or I'll start with consciousness, God, and then try to explain matter. You're saying, well, that may be an issue, a problem. Repeat why that is a problem, if you don't mind.
It's a problem because consciousness itself is also part of matter.
Okay, I get it. I get it, because you're like, okay, well, you're looking at this material thing here. You see it has carbon, sulfur, so on and so forth, and it reports to be conscious. And then we make a mistake by saying this consciousness thing must be something else, right? Now, in terms of practicality, I tend to, in terms of experience, that is, I say, well, that there are certain things that you need to do with regards to your consciousness. It's different from working out your biceps. You need to work out your concentration, sensory clarity, equanimity, master yourself, and so on and so forth. But I do agree with you in the sense that I don't go looking for this consciousness thing out there in the world. It is more of a experiential kind of, I experience myself through it. I call it feeling, image, and talk, right? There's talk and image in the head, and then there's feeling in the body. And it needs to be contended with the same way that the other, if you will, matter needs to be contended with. Does that kind of, that summary that I gave kind of represent what you're saying?
In some sense, yes, but I believe that consciousness itself is matter.
Can you dig more into that, and perhaps maybe you need to clarify what you mean by, is it a different kind of matter, or what do you mean?
Bernard said that matter changes from one state to the other. Consciousness is just one iteration of matter. It is not different from any other matter. It is just a different state.
I don't know if we understand enough about consciousness to say that. It sounds like you're saying that consciousness is energy. That it sounds like how some people say the spirit is just the energy, and they try to connect the spiritual with the physical, because the energy is a part of the physical, because the energy, the universe is made up of matter and energy. It's almost, it sounds like you're in that territory, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Mr. Ibrahim, would you want to change the word matter to something else? Because I saw someone here say another form of order, or a word that I like to use instead of matter sometimes in order to clarify things is causality. Because matter and causality are kind of, you have space, time, and you have causality. Causality is that realm of matter, right? / energy, right? Where something causes something else. You're not talking about space-time. Space-time is the arena, and then the players, if you will, play in that causality game. And you're just kind of saying that since we are in this realm of causality, whereby, yes, your consciousness can get affected by this or that, and your consciousness perhaps can move things, like, then we're in that realm. It's just a different form. We perhaps don't understand it. Just reiterating what Bernard said, but asking if you can perhaps rephrase a matter to help us. And does this causality or order thing help?
Okay. Logic is causality. Logic is the system that controls things. If you make an argument, 1 + 1 is 2, that is logical. It doesn't matter if you're speaking about chairs or antelopes or people. The logic is consistent. So that is causality. The game of interaction between differences. Consciousness, however, allows for the interaction to be unique. It is something. It is not just causality. It is an experience. So it has to be somehow conjoined to the world that is imbued with energy and also matter. It is not simply just an arena to play around.
So far, I don't see any issues, and you can repeat, Bernard, in the sense that, okay, well, consciousness, there's experience, you're in here in the world. I agree. I don't think it's somewhere out there in the spirit land. I like to call it spirit just to remove the woo out of spirit. I don't know what your thoughts are, Bernard.
Well, first things first, Snuggles back in here with a super chat. Thank you for that last super chat that when I got up. I know Ike read it about how you Snuggles talked about people trying to out $5 him today. You are still the $5 champion of the world. Nobody's taking that crown. Don't worry, you got it. He said, "This is my donation for the guy with the rolling thunder voice to unmask themselves. It says, let us see the mystery behind the voice." Now, I don't know. Yeah, I think he's the ruler of a country by the sound of his voice, so I don't think he's going to unmask himself. So no, I don't. Quit asking questions like that. You're going to get beheaded if you keep asking that question. He has that kind of power. There, I said it. Says, all right, Snuggles, put your hands up. Shout out to There I Said It. And also Black Man Being Brutally Honest says, shout out to Bernard Riley, Ike, and Ibrahim. Great combo. Absolutely great conversation. I don't got too much to add to what he's saying there. It's it turns into a situation where people define different things in a different way. I'm comfortable when it comes to consciousness with just simply just saying that's in the realm of the we don't know it, we can't explain it. And I'm okay with that, because if when we overthink it, we end up in a situation where the consciousness becomes the spirit. And what happens when you die? Does that consciousness or spirit, like our Melody suggested, does it go to another body because the spirit, because it's energy and it can't be destroyed? It gets confusing. So until we figure out exactly what consciousness is, I'm okay with saying I just don't know and I don't understand it.
Mm-hmm. I have a question for Ibrahim. If we take a step back to the whole, because my working definition here of religion is, it's a set of performative rituals and narratives that force us to contend with experience and action. Now, when it comes to keeping people in order, which is something that somebody said, and then you were like, I kind of agree with that, Bernard, you said that, right? What are your thoughts on that, J. Ibrahim? Is it necessary, and how does it work? Are all therefore equal? In other words, right? All religions, okay, one evolved over here, another one came up over there, just another way, another set of narratives to keep people in order. What are your thoughts on that?
Before I answer that question, I want to clarify previously from Bernard. When I say that I know what consciousness is, I do not mean that I know the absolute truth. What I mean is, this is what it seems to be based on what we know about reality. Imagine if we have artificial intelligence and we can have it reaching so-called consciousness. Now, we will never know if it is the same consciousness that we experience, but we can test to see if it has the same markers that is indistinguishable from what we call consciousness and what we experience. All we can do is label things to the best of our abilities, but truth itself is unknowable. In fact, we cannot even know if we ourselves exist in the same way that we think that we exist. So everything else is a mystery, but with logic, that is a causality aspect. You can see the differences, similarities between relationships, between differentness. Therefore, that is the only constant, causality. How does this relate to that other thing? How does the consciousness of the machine reflect to the consciousness of me? If I make a machine that looks just like me, talks just like me, can also express the same emotions just as me, and I cannot tell that it is a machine until I am told, then that by definition is what we call consciousness. But whether it is the same thing in likeness as my consciousness, we cannot know that much.
Now, do you want to, or Bernard, does that kind of satisfy you?
Oh, no, I understand. Yeah, understand it. I got nothing to add to it.
Now, do you want to answer the question as to why thoughts about order, either bringing people together, binding them together, keeping them in order, or all religions therefore equal? One came over here, one evolved over there. Is there a supreme one? Because there is a narrative of Christianity that says it is supreme, and I can go down. There are many ways in which they say it is, right? But some even try to give an anthropological anthropological argument that it is the ultimate myth because, it is the sacrifice of the innocent, where they tell you that they're actually innocent, and not to get into that whole thing there. But how does it keep order? Is it necessary to keep order and to bind people? And therefore, are all of them equal? In whichever way you want to define equal.
Okay. I come from both Islamic and Christian principles, so I understand both. In the Islamic consensus, Islam is a lot more what you might consider low level. It is a set of rules, principles to live by that will lead you closer to Allah because you follow a set path guided by you.
He said Islam is low level, people.
I heard that. I just let that roll on by. I wasn't sure what he meant, but I was like, okay.
By low level, I mean that it is foundational. I do not mean it is not good. I just mean that the rules are there to set the guiding principles for creating a society. Now, Christianity is higher level. It means that it assumes that the low level principles are already set. If you look at Western societies, the rules are already in play. You have common law, which governs the American system. That is the English common law, which is just the 9 commandments from the Bible. And then it's expanded and logicalized. Now, in relation to order and all these religions, which ones is higher level? I will say there is truth that Christianity is higher level and also good for the order of society, because the myths that exist within Christianity sets it that way that even if you are a reprobate, even if you're a prostitute, even if you're a killer, you can still be redeemed. This means that the individual, even if they're just thieves or lowlifes, can say, Christ can forgive me. Then they can reorder themselves back to society. They do not have to be shamed out of society and existence. They can continually go and atone for their sins and come back to it. This can create order. Let me give an example of the abortion. For example, you might disagree, I might disagree on whether it's good or bad. But what we can agree is most people that do it feel bad about it. There's something that they know it is wrong about it. Now, if you accept Christianity in the true sense, you might say this: it is wrong for me to kill this fetus. However, I need to do it because I am a young girl. If you accept this, then you can then think next time and prevent yourself from being in that situation. But if you simply lie to yourself that it is okay, you will never reconsider that action. So across time, it actually orders you to do the good thing and makes a strong society.
So Islam will be akin to the law, right? That it lays down, you do this, you do that. And we know Islam tends to be that way, right? The law that Jesus came to say, well, I did not come to destroy, but I came to fulfill it. But still, it's going above the law now and saying, he without sin cast the first stone, right? You are saying, hey, this is the law. She did this, we got to kill her. But then the higher level, and just, I said, I poked at you with that low level stuff because I know what you mean, but I wanted to, excite the chat and stuff. But the low level is foundational. It's the law. You do this, you get killed. And then the higher level comes in and says, okay, well, how about how about the whatever it's in the log in your eye versus looking at the speck in your neighbor's eye? As I talked about it earlier, it was more about the lower level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where here's how you establish order, here's how you conquer your neighbors, and here's how you take their farmlands and everything. And these are the rules for that. And then when you go up into the Christianity landscape, it's more of an inward thing where you can think with the abortion level examples like, I know this is wrong, but across time, because Jesus said, I'll still be forgiven anyways. Like, in other words, Christianity gives you an out and gives you a way to weave through time. And that's what you're saying. It's more higher level, right? I assume. I don't know if you have any reactions to what he just said. Bernard.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my one takeaway from it, and it speaks to one of the struggles that I had with Christianity, not a personal struggle, but just a philosophical struggle of what he's defining as high level. I think it could bring more disorder to society in this way. If someone is operating under the belief, even though they kind of misuse it, But if they're operating under that belief that my sins are going to be forgiven, I can repent after I've done wrong. Yes, I've stolen, I've done this, I've done that. And it's not the low level law, as he calls it, that's going to cut my hand off. That's going to give me immediate consequence for my bad actions. But no, I'm good. I can walk around. There may be a little smack on the wrist in society, but overall, the bad things that I've done, long as I didn't do one of the really, really big ones, but most of the bad things that I've done, I can walk around and make my way through society. I can repent. I can have a change of heart, but I've been a complete terrible person for most of my life, and I've now repented, and I'm good. I'm all good with with God and Jesus, and I'm going to heaven. So in many ways, the high level, as he called it, it could promote people to behave in a morally corrupt way because there is an actual physical consequence. It's heavenly, eternal potential consequence. But in the meantime, I'm doing what I want to do, how I want to do it, and the consequences are minimal because it's just a little spiritual internal thing. So I can be a bad person and then repent later. You see how it lends to that.
Well, over here, what is happening is actually that there's too much woo in modern Christianity. If you take the Orthodox or the Catholic churches in the east of Europe, they do not have this problem because the thing is you need the low-level foundations to exist and then you build on top of that. But with Protestant, I can't pronounce that word. With your people,
Protestant. What are you trying to say? What was he trying to say? You on mute, Ike. I think he was trying to say Protestant.
I think he's trying to say Protestantism.
Oh, Protestantism. Yeah, that is weird. Okay. But yeah, go ahead, Jay Ibrahim. We got you.
With those people, the difference is that they have removed the landscape, the environment of the low-level actions, the principles and the rules. Imagine you are a philosopher right now, and you're having this discussion on this topic. First, you must know what logic is. Without logic, you can just be saying anything, and there will be nothing that is foundational, that is holding you to any kind of actions. This is the same with modern Christians. They do not have the foundation, the low-level principles. So they just say anything is possible. God will forgive them. But this is actually incorrect. If you do not understand what you did, repent and actually contend with yourself, I doubt even this God will forgive you for that.
All right. One thing that I do want to do, hopefully I'm doing it right here. Somebody sent a Cash App asking me the question, where do I rate on the Dawkins scale of belief? By the way, JJ, thank you for that. He says consciousness is the ability to ponder on I. Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate that. I know there were some other ones, but I do want to take the time to look at this because a brother sent me a Cash App inquiring about it. So I'm going to answer this question as soon as I figure out what is going on. How do I? Okay, I want to blow this up so hopefully you guys can see it. He says, where do I rank on the Dawkins scale of belief? And I'm going to put this towards Ike as well. I'm going to put him on the spot so he can tell me where he ranks. I don't know if you're having it. I'll read it. Okay, the Dawkins scale of belief, strong theist, meaning do not question the existence of God. I know he exists. 2, de facto theist. I cannot know for certain, but I strongly believe in God. Weak theist. I am very uncertain, but I am inclined to believe in God. 4, pure agnostic, says God's existence and non-existence are exactly equiparable. That's a weird word. It's equip and probable together. I never saw that word. Equiparable. I don't even know what that means. Yeah, forgive my
Equiprobable just means equally probable.
Equiprobable. I've never heard or read equiprobable, but equally probable. Okay, the pure agnostic says God's existence and non-existence are exactly equally probable. Okay. Weak atheist. And now we're getting I think we're probably getting to me in Ike care territory right here, but I don't know. Ike may be a weak theist. I don't know. But here we go. A weak atheist. I do not know whether God exists, but I'm inclined to be skeptical. I like that. De facto atheist. I cannot know for certain, but I think God is very improbable. I kind of like that one too. Strong atheist. I am 100% sure that there is no God. I don't like that one. That's too far. I don't like when people go there. But somewhere between 5 and 6. I do not know whether God exists, but I'm inclined to be skeptical. That's a safe place right there for me. Ike, where would you rate yourself on this scale? If I need to blow it up a little more, I will.
All good. You see, I'm gonna choose a rank here, and I'm not gonna blame Dawkins for doing this because but it's a one-dimensional thing. It's like here is a scale of levels of theism, and it does not go into this other axis, right? Which I tend to go into, where the question does not even arise. However, the one I would either be a weak the weak atheist one sounds best to me, right? However, I like to jump out of this whole dimension and say, hey, this God exists thing that you guys are saying has nothing to do again with the fact that existence exists. It is a trippy thing. I have a consciousness. I have to align myself. I have to contend with action and experience. I am moved by narrative and so on and so forth. And then I tend to personify these things, and that's how it moves me. And to me, that's the whole story. And this whole thing about arguing what to call it and arguing that I know what book, it's like, in other words, I don't. It does not move my personality at all to be along this spectrum. But if you're gonna force me, I'll go with the weak atheist stuff, just because But I would strongly add that for me, that's why I don't like to answer the question, because you could also call me a weak theist, right? But the whole question of the God thing seems to me to be a mistake, just outright. Just a mistake. The religious stuff, yes, fine. You could see me in your church tomorrow, but if you ask me, do you believe? Are you a believer? I'll just walk away.
Wow. Just walk away. That's funny. Jay Ibrahim, if you had to decide, since we're going here, if you had to pick one of these, would you say you fall into strong theist, de facto theist, weak theist, pure agnostic? I don't think you're on the atheist spectrum. I can if I gather what you're saying, what you've said thus far, but where would you put yourself?
Strong theist.
All right, strong theist. Let me blow that back. Let me make sure. Strong theist. I do not question the existence of God. I know he exists. Strong theist. I saw New in the chat said he's 100%. He says I am 100% sure there is no God. See, that's I can't go with the 100% sure thing, but when some people give God certain contradictory attributes, you can be 99% sure that the God as some people describe it, you could be 99.99% sure that doesn't exist, but there are some concepts of God that I can never put that strong of a statement on that I'm 100% sure, or even 99.99% sure that it doesn't exist, because the reality is we don't know everything. There's always a possibility of something. So that's why, the weak atheist, I do not know whether God exists, but I'm inclined to be skeptical, or I cannot know for certain, but I think God is very improbable. Those I do like those. I do like.
Yeah,
those.
I'm gonna play the look. there's also a social dimension to this, okay? And I'm not challenging you, Jay Ibrahim. Don't send your, your Fulani herdsmen, AK-47 carrying people against me. Please don't. It'll take you some time to cross over from Africa, but I sense, okay, based on the things that Jay Ibrahim has said, plus all the conversations I've had with him, plus, I'm familiar with the guy. I sense, and you don't have to respond, I sense a philosopher king aspect to his answer. In other words, he is doing that will thing. He is projecting this boom, ba ba boom. I'm playing the social dynamic thing. I'm going to construct this God thing. I'm a strong theist, but I suspect it's all inside him. And he probably thinks he is God or some kind of shit like that.
That's funny. I was waiting for him to unmute and answer. He's like, I think you got him.
No comment.
Snuggle 668 says, to each of the gentlemen on the panel, can you consciously hold on. All right. Can you consciously describe what you see from each other from your own perspective about one another, please? What, do you understand what he's saying? Describe what you see from each other from your own perspective. And you think you're muted, Ike? Ike, you're muted.
No, okay. I'm trying to interpret what he says here. Consciously describe what we see from each other. Well, I just kind of described that based on my own, I tend to have a psychological view of things in general, in the sense that it's more of an individualist perspective, if you will, whereby I am looking at, well, what is good for this one kind of person is not good for the other type of person. And it makes sense because you kind of describe me as one of those people who is like, I don't necessarily want to expose what I'm saying or what I mean when it comes to this God question, because it's like, I'm over here in this corner of the cave, and unless I see you there, I don't want to answer the question because I don't know what you mean, right? And I think it's fair. That's a fair stance to take, because it is true. When you go, I'm over there and we using this kind of language and we talking this kind of way, and you're coming in here, I don't know where you're coming from, I don't know the words that you mean. So, and that's why I described, to answer Snuggle's question, what I see in you, Bernard, an agnostic person, right? And for me, it's more of a typical kind of a Protestant direction, okay? You've left certain kinds of the dogmatic, shall we say, which is in the Orthodox Church and in the Catholic Church, certain kinds of foundational, ritualistic type things, and then you start going into it gets more woo, unfortunately, like, because it's like you would think, oh, the Protestantism was going away from the woo, but it just gets more woo. In other words, it goes away from the foundation, it goes away from the church, the organization. You're like, let's break away from the organization, and then now you find you're just kind of floating out there, and now you're gonna say whatever, and it's gonna be whatever. Now it's gonna be about tithes, and people just feel good. I'm gonna dance. I'm gonna speak in tongues. I'm gonna and then what's the next step? The next step is this doesn't really. There's no grip here. It's all just whatever they want to say. And then the women, it tends to then be populated by women, becomes a social club. And as a man, you step away. And for Jay Ibrahim, what I sense in him is philosopher king type. And I'm not saying he's lying, but psychologically, I think he is positing God. When he says he strongly believes in God, I think he is putting the God there, and he's strongly putting it there. And he may have perhaps political, psychological, or other kinds of reasons for doing it. But that's what I sense in the dude.
Yeah. Interesting. I don't know if you exactly got me right. Well, okay, you did say agnostic. I don't know how. I'm agnostic to deism. If you define the God in a way that's beyond what I could even think of, I do hold a certain level of agnosticism to it. But when you talk about the gods that have been worshipped by man throughout human history, I mean, I get a little stronger in my my utter disbelief for some of those. But there's God concepts that I could say, I can conceptualize that. So I don't know. So I would, that's why I said the weak or de facto atheist is closer to where I fall. But I mean, I don't take the overwhelmingly strong position, but there are some God concepts that I can't go with that. I just think it's out in just kooky land, the way some people describe some of this stuff. But there, I said, it says, whenever someone takes the Will Smith I Am Legend stance, I cringe. Who can know it? Actually, I don't think nothing was terribly wrong with Will Smith's position in that movie when he said there is no God, because given the universe of that movie, the type of God that they were talking about is the all-loving, all-knowing, all-caring God who wrote a book and has a plan for humanity. And clearly nowhere in that book did it suggest or imply that 99% of human beings would turn into flesh-eating zombies or vampires and feed on the rest of human beings until human beings no longer exist on Earth. So I think when stuff like that happens, to some degree, you can abandon the God concepts that we grew up believing in. It still doesn't mean that the universe didn't have a creator of some sort, some way, some shape, some form. But yeah, our religious doctrines kind of let us down if the world turns into that in that particular way. That's so I don't think Will Smith character in I Am Legend was completely out of bounds for drawing his conclusion that he drew. It's like I cringe like when I still watch The Walking Dead, even though it's kind of getting boring to me. But Father Gabriel still walking around with the priest collar in the apocalypse is just weird to me. But anyway, either way. And like I already said what I thought Ike was at the beginning of the show. He's a closet atheist. But we're gonna move on to Truth. Go ahead, Truth. You got the floor. You got the mic.
Appreciate it. So I was really contemplating like how am I gonna go out and express this, but I'm just gonna embrace the scorn. So based off my perception of reality, the experiences I've had, God is definitely real. It can be reasonably understood too. There is a reason for life and its consciousness itself. And when you embrace this, you get rewarded by the universe itself, to keep it simple. Like there's a lot of cliche stereotypes about God and about spiritual beliefs and what have you. And in my own personal experience, a lot of them are true. Like life after death, the soul, ancestors, guardian angels, all these things. I've experienced all of them personally. So, and also there's, to me, I used to be an atheist. I've always been a secularly minded, scientifically minded, like individual. I had a bunch of spiritual experiences that kind of shook me out of that, and then I tried to make sense of it. But what's interesting to me is not my experiences or what have you, but rather that there actually really is an easy, at least for me, an easy pathway to reason your way to the likelihood of God. So the way I like to look at stuff is odds of probability, right? If you didn't have a data sheet, if you didn't have statistics literally letting you know what to do and what not to do, you'd have to decide for yourself what the odds of success are. And obviously the mechanisms in our brain that do this calculus are sufficient enough to have gotten our species to said plateau, right? Most people look to the future to see advancement. And I'm like, the future is only possible because of the past. So whatever creates the future had to have already existed in the past. That's how you can bet on the future. So there, it's to me, it's a little, it's missing the mark to assume niggas was goat herders. It's like, no, can you herd a goat? Can you find a random goat, capture him, make him breed within your territory, capture his children, and have a never-ending loop of goats doing your fucking work for you? That's genius. That's fucking genius. And it's not a surprise that that individual birthed the civilization that would lead to rocket ships, right? You got to start somewhere. So I say that to say that humans have always been, especially the best of us, they've always been incredibly intellectual, inquisitive, and curious. And so even worst case, their religions are going to probably be incorrect, but probably honestly inspired. I don't want to like belittle them. Anyway, I say all that to say the reason aspect for me is like it starts with this: to exist or to not exist. Full stop. Full stop. Whether you would exist or not exist. Now, people will immediately make it personal. They'll say, okay, is it better to have an opportunity for a good life that's not guaranteed, that can potentially end in horrible ruin, or is it better to never exist at all? So, like, would you flip that coin? If you're just some fucking consciousness floating in darkness, and I say, look, I can turn your lights off and you never were. Or you can continue this gamble and there's a 50% chance you have a happy life and a 50% chance it's a miserable life, and you almost wish, I don't even want to exist. I'm being tortured. Every moment of existence is torture. Why even exist? You got to flip that coin. Most people are going to flip that coin and say, yeah, let's run that simulation. I'll take the risk. Because who wants to not exist? That you can't even contemplate not existing. That's fucking strange. And so it's like, okay, what if I said it's a 60% chance of misery, 70% chance of misery, 90% chance of misery? Do you still just rather not exist? Now, in a state of neutrality, most people are going to take that gamble. In a state of misery, most people are going to get suicidal. Then it comes into, okay, so if existence could have this potential risk, why have it? Ironically, to me, the question answers itself. What would be the point of an existence that has no contrast, right? You can't get meaning, because like immediately by contemplating whether to exist or not, you're creating the conversation of meaning. It's like, what's the purpose? Well, the purpose is experience. Well, where's the value in the experience? It's selfish and individualistic. It's I want to experience. And so it's like, okay, well, what do you want to experience? That's where the good or bad comes in. And then getting to the good, it's like, okay, we've established experience could be better than not experience. But then it's like, what makes a meaningful experience? Again, now you're forced into the world of contrast. You're literally forced into the world of contrast because you just said you want value. And the first contrast was existence or non-existence. The next contrast is going to be, sorry about my dog. The next contrast is going to be, for example, if your life was perfectly wonderful, would you even know it? Right? Do fish know they're in water? Right? If you don't have something to contrast, you can't create value. It's like the rainbow is beautiful because it's multiple colors. If it was all one color, it wouldn't be a rainbow. It would just be some fucking light, right? If everything in the world was one note, there would be no value. The value comes from the contrast. I love my son, not your son, but I love all people. But even then, it's like value, 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 value. So in order for you to have a meaningful experience, you have to have the top and the bottom. That's how you get value. The quickest way to say it is, what would joy be without pain? What would sun be without rain? You need that contrast to get the value. Otherwise, you won't be happy. You consciously will not experience appreciation, because what are you appreciating if not the contrast? So experience.
Okay, my rebuttal to that always. So basically, what you're saying is, somewhere on Earth, a child is starving to death. So you, truth, can understand the enjoyment of. So you can. So you.
Yes.
So you can enjoy that steak. Somebody is starving.
Yes.
God created the universe. Okay, God created the universe. He's going to use this child as a pawn just to starve. So
that's kind of bad.
Hold on. But so truth can go, this steak is wonderful. Isn't my life great?
Yeah, no, so yes, literally yes. And it's not about that child, it's about your life. I guarantee in your life you've suffered. I guarantee before you were 5, you were probably suicidal. Before you were 5, you probably already contemplated, is this worth it? So yes, that is why life is this way, because this is the easiest way to understand it. If I asked you, hey, create a universe, you know what you're going to have to do? You're going to put a person in a place. That makes space. Now we got space. Space creates the contrast. Up, down, left, right. Can't have left if you want right. Can't have right if you want left. Can't have up if you want down. Can't have happiness without sadness. You literally cannot have a state without its inverse opposite. They discovered this in Taoism. That's what the yin-yang symbol symbolizes. The idea that the contrast creates the reality. So if you want a life that's happy,
hold on,
you have
hold
to
on.
have the potential for misery.
Okay, now you're putting limitations on God, assuming that you believe that God is an all-powerful, all-knowing being that could do anything. You're saying that it's not possible for him to create a universe where people are generally okay without some kid starving to death or being eaten by wolves.
You're taking it too extreme. It's less about the kid.
You said the
more,
extreme.
It's no, just please. It's less about that kid suffering and more about the reality of the consequences of physics, right? The freedom that a man has dictates that societies will emerge and that leaders will be chosen. That starving child is not some random facet of nature. That is the machinations of our society and our failure to organize correctly. It's like God could come in and be Big Daddy and go, you guys will follow the rules. Does that give you any credit? Here's an example. Here's a perfect fucking example. If you run a race and you fucking feel amazing because you remember when you started training, you were a slow ass piece of shit. And now you're fucking dominating. And I come in and go, yo, bro, you happy? I've been spiking you with steroids. You're going to be like, yo, you took my win away from me. All the pride, all the joy, all the meaning from that victory has been gone. And I go, what are you talking about? You still have the same thing. You have the trophies. You have the success. You took the meaning out of it because I didn't earn it. So if life is about meaning, then we have to have freedom. And if we have to have freedom, that means infinite potential. Greatest happiness, greatest sorrow, all within spectrum. So that means that, suffering is possible so that we can have happiness.
I get that. I understand the steroid analogy, and for finite beings on Earth finding their own meaning, that does make sense. But when you invoke an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-everything God who cares, and in order for that meaning to take place, there must be a ridiculous amount of suffering. I think the universe, you don't realize it, but what you're describing is the way that a universe would look without a God.
No, that's
you're describing a universe that if men had to roll up their sleeves and figure it out and make it happen, come hell or high water, there will be some winners, there will be some losers, there will be some people that starve, there will be some people that eat, and the onus is on us to figure it out and make the best possible world for ourselves. Then it turns into a situation to where you're just creating a being and setting them up high and saying he's down there watching, but he's watching and not going to do anything, or watching with indifference, or watching with it's almost like you're describing a world where there's no being there participating, but the only thing that you can say about you can say that there's a God, but he's not a personal God. You can say that and then still hang on to what you're saying. But if it's all on us to figure it out and do everything for ourselves and make sure that kid don't starve, then what is the use for I'm not seeing any utility in the all-knowing, all-loving, all-powerful being that you're putting limitations on when you say he can't do this because if he did this, then that. What do you mean he can't do it? He could do anything.
So like an example is, right, like it's about the goal. So if I have a child, I have a son, and my goal is for my son to live a meaningful, empowered life. I could live his life for him, but that would take my own goal away because then he owes his success to me, right? If my son becomes a drug addict, I could spoil him and make it so that the consequences of his actions do not befall upon him. But then I've robbed him of his own uniqueness and value, right? His life has become less meaningful and people will look at him that way. They will look at him as though he means less. They'll say, oh, look at this guy who's unable to survive on his own despite the support of his father. Look at this guy who his life is almost less meaningful now because he's like a drug addict and able to contribute less to the benevolence of society. And it's like, it's not a coincidence. Likewise, if I become a drug addict, what, God just takes the addiction away? Like, that's fucking dumb. You have to suffer the consequences in order for you to get the value, meaning he has to stand back. I understand
that part. But this conversation started with you saying there must be a yin and a yang. There must be destruction in the world so we can understand peace and happiness. And then I responded by saying is that your full belly after eating a ribeye steak and a loaded baked potato, you can enjoy that because somewhere there's somebody starving. So this person who God, an all-knowing being, knew that this person was going to starve before he even created him. He knew that you and other people were not going to put the provisions in place to make sure that this person does not starve. So he just would have had to create him as a pawn just to starve, so you can say, my steak is wonderful. That's where we started at. Now, if you want to talk about human beings in life and a father raising his son and not doing too much for him so he can figure it out, I get that part. But when you try to put a giant bow over all of these
my concept is God. They call God the Father, and I really relate to the concept because the idea is the first there was one human who was the first human to contemplate God. Like, that's a mind fuck. He was the first human in all species to look up and go, what the fuck, is there a God? And then to begin to actually try to unpack that and go, if there is a God, what is a God, and what does it mean, and how would God be? And I think the reason why God immediately gets related to the father is because a mother is more likely to take care of a drug addict than a father. A father is more likely to say, you're a drug addict, you fucked up, I guess you got to die. It doesn't even mean that father doesn't love you. It doesn't mean that father's not crying about you. It's that men are more willing to let you suffer your consequences because they know that's where your value comes from. Pride, right? The victory. Why do you want it? Because it gives you meaning. How did you get that meaning? Because you and only you know how you earned it. You remember every single thing you went through, and it gives value to your own existence. And so it's all about that. It's about creating a valued existence. And so the consequence of this experiment is that as we play together in the sandbox, some of us might turn into serial killers and fuck shit up. And then it's up to the rest of us to stop him. We can't go to dad and say, Dad, Billy's being mean. It's like, okay, then go fuck Billy up. Stop being a little bitch. You said it matters. And see where the meaning came in? See how the meaning jumped right in. How many movies are about vanilla, boring shit that ends and no one cares? No, it's a fucking hero and a villain. All right, because that's the most meaningful thing. The hero that rises. The Matrix. Why does everybody love the Matrix? Why does everyone relate to Neo? Because he just wants to be a regular guy. He just wants to not to think too hard. But deep down, there's a calling. What's the calling? That there's a meaningful experience going on, and you can pretend it's not going on, or you can rise to fight it. When you rise to fight a challenge, now you're given. It's like why people play games on hard instead of easy. Why don't you just play that bitch on easy and beat the shit in 5 minutes? Because then it means nothing. It means more on a harder difficulty, right? And so literally, you're not going to like your life unless it wasn't easy. You won't care unless the meaning comes from the struggle. And so it's like that is
I get that part of it when we move it there, talking about an individual finding meaning in his life. Yeah, nothing that if you didn't have to work hard for it, it's not going to mean as much. Like those general principles, I understand that, but there are some baseline problems that I have when people try to apply those principles to a deity. And when but we went back and forth on that, so yeah, no need to go any further on that. Jay Ibrahim, the conversation moved forward. I didn't see in the back chat that you that when Snuggles asked what I thought was a weird question when he had asked other people to describe what they thought of the other person's belief, you had said that you wanted to take a try at that with either me or Ike. So Jay Ibrahim, I'll pass it to you and circle it back there.
I believe that you grew up within Christianity. And then when you realized that it was no longer giving you what you were promised as a child, you realized that there are logical consistencies that were incorrect. For example, what Brother Truth has described right now about the personal God that is caring, loving, and also all-powerful and all-knowing, you realized the logical contradiction in your mind. You started to break it down and you realized that this God is useless. Number one, this God also logically does not have any evidence of existence based on logic. Therefore, why would I believe in a fairy tale that doesn't even make sense in the existential aspect, the aspect of how to even live a good life to begin with? This then led you towards this path, which has now where you're trying to find meaning, but beyond fairy tales, which do not have a good foundation to even begin with.
Yeah, good. Good. I like it. I like that sums it up. I think you got it about 85 to 90% correct. The trying to find meaning part. I think as human beings, I think each human being truly has to define meaning for themselves. And the scary part about it is that even when you found meaning, you got to look and realize it's really subjective, and in the grand scheme of things, it's probably meaningless. But it matters to you. So that's one that's one part about it, and that's where I'm at, and that's where I look at people like Carl Sagan who wax poetically about the universe and all of that. I do find meaning and get that same religious like feeling from that, but
that's funny.
But
I love Carl Sagan.
Yeah, that's my dude. That's my dude. But yeah, but no, that was good stuff. That was good stuff, J Ibrahim. I definitely like how you worded or explained that. Did you just want to
psychoanalyze me too, J Ibrahim?
Yeah,
was it all for
go ahead and psychoanalyze Ike.
Now for Ike, I believe that he is also a strong theist, just as myself. I believe that he only said weak atheist because of the one-dimensional sphere that was presented, because he does believe in God. To Ike, God is the origin of all origins. That is God. Now, everything else, he's willing to contend with it and add stories and layers if it is meaningful to the creation of something. For example, society, his own ambitions, his own ability to move forward. So, yes, he does believe in God. And to Ike, God is the origin.
Well, yes, I would have to agree with that. And I said so much. The first thing I said was, I recognize this one-dimensional thing and you're forcing me into a one-dimensional thing. I would like to jump out into the Z direction or whatever. And that's where I am. But if you're going to force me into this, then I'll find a nice little area there. So I think you got me right. In another dimension, I am a strong atheist because of the origin thing, which should not be,
strong theist?
Strong theist. Because of the thing I mentioned about, opening my eyes and existence exists, and I'm right there, and that's where I stop the questioning, and the rest is just in the meaning, the story, and so on and so forth. So there's certain things that Bro Truth said, not Bro Truth, but just Truth.
You gonna piss that nigga off?
Yeah, I did want your response to what he was saying. So go ahead, and we're almost about to wrap this up. So Ike, you can more or less give your response to what Truth was saying, and then or any closing out thing that you want to say. Take as much time as you need, because I know he said a lot, and I can tell you wanted to jump in at the moment. So go ahead.
So the things that he said, for me, me personally, there is this kind of a logical dance that gets done. And he seems to like the logic thing. His eyes just light up, and he's like, you see, it's the to be or not to be. And then you ask this question, and then the next step, and then the next step, and then the next step. And I'm like, so for me, that is useful when you talk about the action aspect of morality. It's almost like an abstraction from the stories and all that kind of stuff, where you're like, well, what is good? What is bad? Good has to do with life, right? So to that point, I would agree. It's like, we don't talk about the good of this bottle, right? Good has to do with life, and typically life that we care about, not the good of the ant, unless you're an extreme animal rights activist, right? So you start making some kind of logical arguments. Okay, good, life, what kind of life, what's good for human life, freedom of consciousness or of will of a certain kind, the mind to make a decision. So what's good for the mind, so on and so forth. So you start constructing that, but that's within the realm of action, right? For me, I don't see the need to go there in order to prove the existence of God. In other words, meaning is the outgrowth of me just being here. And me just being here is the beginning and the end of the God question, right? All that other stuff is okay. Now I'm trying to make a logical argument as to good. I'm trying to construct some kind of objective framework around which we can talk about the good life, the bad life, what's good for it, meaning, so on and so forth. And I have no objections whatsoever to what he said. But I tend not to ask those questions to find metaphysical answers as to, God must exist. Because with what you were saying, Bernard, it's kind of like you're taking your experience of the universe and you're kind of saying, well, it's meaningful. I've already, in other words, truth. What I'm saying is, you have already presupposed the existence of God before you went down this logical path, and you're just more like saying, "Oh, this is kind of wise, kind of or maybe not." Okay, and perhaps we could talk about it, but my thing is, I just start from that metaphysical kind of place where it's like, okay, existence exists, and then I stop. And I think Jay Ibrahim is right. I'm a strong theist in that particular regard. So I would like to just end, my whole thing here by reiterating the point that God is the personification of existence in and of itself, right? The personification of that beginning point, okay? And why is it personified? Because that's what we tend to do. And I'm not into it's just like there's a beginning point and we personify it. That's it. I'm a human being, so I'm going to personify it, right? I'm going to look at it as though I was bargaining. In other words, when I'm thinking in that place in my mind where I'm like trying to wrestle with existence itself and try to find my way and make movements, as Jay Ibrahim said, I'm thinking of the world as though it was also had a say, Doesn't mean that I'm therefore not going to be like, oh, it's this particular guy who has this name. And it's like many religious texts tell you cannot pronounce the name, you should not say it, it is the unknowable, so on and so forth. I'm very much in line with that. So religion for me, again, just to finalize everything, as I said in the very beginning, is the set of acted out rituals and narratives that force us to contend with action and existence, because we cannot know how to act unless it is embedded in narrative. The kind of truth has to be embedded in narrative. If I give you a set of logical propositions that do this, it does not move you. But if I show you a picture of, give you a story of Han Solo or Jesus Christ or whatever these hero stories are, that's what moves you. That's what it gives you a lot of context. And for some reason, we are driven that way. We're not driven the other way. Now we're free to abstract from these stories and, take from the story of Narcissus and say, narcissism is this. Take from the story of Jesus and try to abstract certain things about, turning up the other cheek and so on and so forth. But those abstractions don't move us. We need a story to move us, whether it's Yoda or Christ or Buddha or whatever. And that for me is the religious thing, similar to what I mentioned in the past when we were talking about the Constitution or the bringing back of order in the past streams. I said that you need this narrative aspect to bind people together. And that's the dimension I like to jump up to, where meanwhile people like Dawkins like to keep you on this single dimensional thing, which is, I just don't exist there at all. And with that, I'll peace out.
All right. Thank you. Once again, this was a fourth installment of me and Ike's Sunday service. That this one actually, we actually talked about God and church. So that was very, very fitting to have this conversation on Sunday. I'd like to thank everybody, man. Everybody who came through, who super chatted. I see K Dot down there. He said the Bible is the most red pill book out there. There's actually a lot of truth in that. Bible is 2 red pills sometimes. but yeah, shout out to everybody who participated in this conversation in any way, shape, or form. If you hit the like button, shared, subscribed, Cash App, super chatted. Shout out to Truth joining the panel. Shout out to Jay Ibrahim who dropped down. Shout out to everybody, and special shout out and thanks to Ike who brought the knowledge. I got it right there. Clicked on it. Go subscribe to Ike. Dropping it in the chat room one more time. Make sure if you're not subscribed to Ike, do yourself that good service and subscribe to Ike, because you're missing out on a wealth of knowledge over there if you're not subscribed. Thank you to all of my new Patreons. Marcus Jones, got your whole government name up there. I apologize for that. I don't know if you got a problem with that, but shout out to you. Shout out to you for becoming a Patreon and everybody. And we are out of here. Peace.
Yo, thanks for